TikTok, time to rock. Why are you smiling at that? Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. Your friendly neighborhood philosopher here, D. Wood. With me now is Issa Kabeer, who is a Sufi Muslim. We were supposed to have AP on with us. He did message me. When was that? Let me see. He messaged me this morning at 11:17 and said his laptop is broken and he can't make it. Then he said he fixed it. Then he said he can't make it. So apparently his laptop caught his COVID. That's what AP wants us to believe. But in reality, he probably knew that I was going to give him the opportunity to apologize to all Sufis for calling them goofy Sufis. How does that make you feel, Issa, when you hear people, intolerant people like AP, calling you goofy Sufis? He didn't say it about you, but he said it about some woman.
I, shucks, I love to be a goofy Sufi.
No one's going to understand that because no one remembers Goofy. You and me are the only ones here who remember who Goofy is.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. I mean, Of course, folks are going to be like, hey, this thing is weird. I mean, in any religion, people are like, this stuff is weird. It's crazy. It's, it's nutty, but,
Yeah, and I'm wondering, because he said it about, we were watching her video, and it's basically a woman who said she had converted to Islam after reading a book on Sufism. So she became a Muslim. And then she was saying she's going to have to pull off social media because of the number of Muslims who were sending her messages about
I saw that video.
about wanting to get with her and so on. And it's just that is an ongoing thing. And so anyway, AP referred to her as a goofy Sufi. And so I don't know if he thinks of all Sufis as goofy Sufis or if he was just thinking her, because the parallel in my mind now that as I'm saying it, there are lots of people who, there are lots of Muslims where if I quote the hadith to them, they'll go, no, I only believe, that's not in the Quran. I only believe in the Quran. And I start asking them questions like, okay, how many times a day do you pray? And they say, 5. And I'll say, what's the Shahada? And they say, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. I say, okay, those don't come from the Quran. So it doesn't sound like you're really a Quran only Muslim. It sounds like you're using that as an excuse. So I think of them as like in a different category from actual Quran only, but there are actual Muslims who are Quran only Muslims who have a position a well thought out position that is, hey, that's the revelation, that's the speech of Allah. Muhammad is the guy who delivered it. I don't have to build my life around Muhammad when I have this. And so it's kind of like there's a distinction in my mind between real Quran only Muslims and like pretend Quran only Muslims. And I was wondering, I wanted to ask AP, like, does he think all Sufis are goofy, or is it just like this girl who's like, oh, I'm a Sufi now, hee hee, that sort of thing.
So she did say she was a Sufi. I missed that in the video I watched. I didn't see that because I missed that part of the video, so I watched it myself. And I saw the creepy, oh my gosh, creepy dudes. Like, it's terrible. I'm like, just chill. And then, I'm going to tell you a funny story about my life. I was in college. I was doing one of my college programs, and these two young ladies wanted to go to a Salafi mosque. So they needed a man to come, and I guess I was the chaperone that was coming to help support this situation. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And it was a Salafi mosque. It was masjid. It was really, really intense because it was extremely segregated. So women were in one spot, men were in another spot.
I did 2 debates in a Salafi mosque once, and that's how it was. They actually had different sections, and yeah, we had to walk through different entrances. Like women had to walk in through a different door as the men. So yeah. Anyway, point was, I understand.
And I think it's really important. One thing that's very important in any spirituality is to have accountability. I think men need to have a lot more accountability in these spaces. I'm like, look, you see a pretty lady, you can control yourself. You know what I mean? And it's like really unfortunate that we don't see that. Like, some guys are like, no, they must be hidden. They must wear a hijab. They must wear a niqab. They must do all of this. And I'm like, maybe you need to work on yourself before you tell these women what they need to do. You need to work on your own, issues, if you don't have self-control. And then I see this weird thing, like what happened with that woman. It's not isolated. It happens all the time. And I think it's with men who are extremely repressed and don't know how to communicate with women. They're like, oh, the woman's a Muslim. So now what that means is I have a space to engage with her, romantically speaking. And I'm like, have you ever considered this woman may have a partner? She might have a husband. Like, have you considered it? It's like a weird thing that you don't assume. You assume the woman is single without assuming that she's maybe perhaps in a relationship. But going back to the story, it was interesting because I went there and they wanted to do an interview. And I found out later on why they wanted to. Well, one was a very close friend of mine and the other person wanted to do the interview. So we went upstairs. No, I went there and I had to wait to speak with the people who would have the interview. And I eventually was able to get an interview, but they said, yo, we can't have a camera. You got to turn that camera to the side. We don't believe in filming. And I was like, that's really interesting because, there are Muslim movies and cartoons with filming in it. So I'm like, this isn't everyone. This is your particular interpretation. But what happened was we got there, we did the interview, and it was really, really interesting because the person who was doing the interview was actually, how do we say it? She was same gender loving. Let's put it that way. So she had she was a woman who was interested in women. And so that would have been probably problematic. And she couldn't bring her partner because her partner was, a male who's interested in other men. So that was not going to happen. And he was very kind of open. So I ended up having to be there. And then they did this interview and the guy was like, well, I used to be involved with, that Nation of Islam. That's the fake Islam. That I got involved with real Islam. I was like, oh, okay. And then he's like, we're the Salafus Saleh. We're the real Islam. We're with the, what do they call it? The predetermined, the presupposed, I forget the term that they use, but we're with the ranks. We're with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And I was like, okay, and they said we have to put the camera to the side. We can't be seen in the video. And then they started asking questions. They said, well, what is our purpose on earth? Why are we here? So the first one was like, I'm not answering this question. So she just kept writing. And the second one gave this really beautiful answer where she was like, well, we're here to be good people. We're here to do, the right thing and be the best person we can be. It was just a very beautiful thing. And she was actually a Sufi herself. But then they came to me and I'm like, what answer do these Salafis want? What answer can I give them? What will be the correct answer? And it came to me. I knew what the answer was. I said, we're here. The humans and the jinn are here to worship God. And they said, you're right, but you're wrong. And I'm like, huh? I thought that was the right answer. He said, you were right, that answer is right, but you didn't teach these women the truth. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. I don't know what to do with this. But it was a really intense experience. But going back onto it, right at the end, I saw these guys eyeing up the women. I was like, oh God, this is so gross. Like I felt dirty watching it, these guys. And I was like, they kind of basically asked if they were married. And I was like, oh my gosh, they believe in polygamy. Because in, the Salafis in the area I'm from believe in polygamy. They believe they can marry multiple women.
Yeah,
and they do.
No question. I know a woman who who converted to Islam and became the second bride of a Muslim living here. I mean, she was in Michigan. Later she left Islam and so on, and left that guy. But yeah, so polygamy is officially illegal, but they do their marriages. They do their marriages at the mosque, and it's all fine.
And the legal way that they do it, from what I've seen, is you can have infinite girlfriends. So basically, these are all girlfriends, but then you get married and you get the nikah in the masjid. And I was like, wow, this is, I don't know. To a degree, I'm like, when I think about polygamy, I've never really met a woman in my life who believes in polygamy. What I have met is that there are women who love a man and they're willing to concede polygamy. It's a very different space. It's not that they actually want the polygamy, but they want the man. So they'll take the polygamy to have the man. But I don't think I've ever met a woman who wants it.
Yeah, and that comes up. Did you see that it was Ali Dawa's show. What does he call it? The Bitter Truth or something like that. But Ali Dawa, it was Ali Dawa, Muhammad Hijab, and another guy, and I think 2 other guys. I think it was 4 guys and 4 Muslim women, and they were breaking it down to the Muslim women that the reason men are getting secret second wives, secret third wives, secret fourth wives is because these Muslim women have been westernized, and now they think it's wrong for their guys to marry multiple women. And so the men are basically blaming the women. It's your fault. Not that we're polygamous. We want to be polygamous. In matter of fact, Ali Dawa just said, hey, you can ask us, do we love our wives? Of course. Do we want more wives? Yes, we do. And so they're breaking it down, but they're putting the blame on the women, that you women, because you're going to complain and harass us if we get second wives, you're the reason that Muslim men get secret second wives and don't tell their first wives. So that's on you. If you became good Muslim women, then you would accept that this is what men are made for. This is what we're made for. We're made to want lots of different women. And so if you were going to be good, so they're kind of shaming the women. Shame on you. And what's really disturbing is you do have, of course, men are impressionable. Women are impressionable by people they look up to. And if you're a young woman and you're sitting there watching these guys you respect and so on, and they're saying, hey, if you're a good wife, you'll be open to your husband having multiple wives. I even saw there's a girl on I think she was posting on either Instagram or TikTok, but people were sharing it on Twitter. But she was basically saying that this is good. That this is good. Your husband will love you more if you bring him more of your friends to be his second and third and fourth wives. And she said she'll even approach women. She said, if I see my husband checking someone out, I'll approach her for marriage. I'll approach her to be another wife for him. And so that's the creepy thing. I mean, you've got the Dawa guys, and you can say, wow, that's really disgusting. But what's even worse is that there will be lots of women who buy into this and say, oh, wow, well, I do want to be a good Muslim wife. Well, I don't want to be brainwashed by the West. I do want to, okay, well, I need to accept it then. And I need to let my husband know that it's fine. So that you'll have these Muslim women going to their husband saying, okay, well, if you want a second, third, fourth wife, I just want you to know that's fine. That's fine with me. And yeah, pretty rough.
In my family, it would be a huge shame if someone ever did that, like do polygamy and stuff. Like my father, I'm going to use his accent. He has a Desi accent, and this is what he said. He said, many wife, a bad life. One wife, a good life. Many wife, a bad life. That's what he would tell me. And he's like, this practice is a very bad practice. And everyone in my family, my father's family, would never do that, ever. That even the idea of going around and doing that, it was very shameful. It was a very shameful thing to do.
You don't have to go into detail if you don't want, but what is your like family background like?
Sure. So this is a very interesting question. So my father's family is South Asian and Egyptian and Iraqi. So I come from this great Sufi saint. His name's Sayyid Ahmed Rifai, and he has a masjid in Egypt. Who's run by people who would be like extended parts of my family, I guess. And then my mother's family's Jewish.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So it creates, like, when people talk about Palestine, Israel, I'm like, I might have an interesting take on this,
Mm-hmm. And just so everyone knows, that is acceptable according to the Quran. It's acceptable for a Muslim man to marry a Jewish or Christian woman.
That's right.
Yeah, but go ahead on all that.
Which is funny. So in the Muslim community, I'm Muslim. In the Jewish community, I'm Jewish.
That's funny.
And then my name's Jesus. So there you go. It's a very wild space, but
that is all 3 of the big ones right there.
Yes,
all rolled into one.
Yes. And I mean, I've read the whole New Testament. I
hey,
love
that
Jesus.
is, by the way, that is funny. That is funny. Muslim father, Jewish mother, and they name you Jesus.
That's right.
Issa.
Well, their teacher, their spiritual guide was a part of it, because like that's a big thing in Sufism. People have a spiritual guide. that they follow like a mentor or a person who, like, this is the way that I would view Sufism to help people understand. It's very much like Jedi religion. You see a lot of that, like Buddhism, Sufism, and even like Christianity has the same thing, because Jesus is, for a lot of people, would be like the ultimate Sufi. He's the big spiritual master that teaches the students with esoteric knowledge, with esoteric wisdom. And yeah, like it's so like when I read like anything in the New Testament, I'm like, oh, I jive with this, I jam with this. You know what I mean? Like all of these kind of mystical teachings that put you at a higher level of thinking. It's not just like intellect; it's like wisdom. So I dig it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be cool because I mean, I've been studying Islam on and off for a long time. It's almost always been straightforward Sunni Islam.
Yeah.
And then occasionally, if I'm interacting with a Shia Muslim, I'll have to look up some things, from Al Kafi or something like that. But I know, I'm trying to think. I can't say I know more about Sufi Islam. I can't say I know more than what I learned in a college class 20 some years ago, where it was just, okay, you got this, and then you've got the mystics. And that's pretty much
Right.
all I've ever, because I tend to respond to people who are attacking me. You know what I mean? Like someone comes in blasting, and that's, oh, okay, well, let me look up what you believe so we can have a conversation. And just in my life, Sufis haven't historically been attacking me and so on. So yeah, we'll have some questions. If anyone has any questions for Issa about Sufism or anything else we're talking about, you can post those. Let's check out a couple comments real quick. Here you have this guy, I'm assuming he's Sunni. He says, Shia and Sufi are not Muslims. Stop tarnish our image. These people are not available.
So I'm going to engage this.
You're not available.
So first and foremost, Sufism is traditional. There are a lot of Sufis who are
that goes way back, like to like before we have records of what was going on in the Ummah. Sufi goes back as far as we can test it, right?
Exactly. It's actually much more authentic than Salafi. But I will be fair and I'll be accountable that a lot of Sunnis were Sufi. They were both. They had both identities. So you had like Salahuddin, who was in the Crusades, right? He was a Sufi. He followed Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, who was a great sheikh, and they were Sunnis and Sufis. So they had both identities. You know what I mean? So they had the mystic identity and they had the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah identity. And then you have people like Pir Vilayat Khan, who has a kind of a Sufi movement where, it's focused on practice, like doing zikr. Zikr is remembrance, and, having like community together. And so it's a spectrum. Sufism's a spectrum, You have Orthodox Sunni Sufis, and then you have people who are very like mystically oriented, people who might be like whirling dervishes who do, spinning, and some of them are Orthodox Sunnis too, but it's a spectrum.
Yeah, so that would be one of the questions I have as far as
Sure.
sources that you would use. So I know there are books that are come from Sufis over the centuries, but as far as like sources on Islam that like as Sunni Muslims would go to Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim and so on, or Shias would go to Al-Kafi or something like that. So do you use like I'm guessing you would go somewhat with Sunni sources, or do you guys have your own source? How's that work?
That's a good question. So if you're asking me personally, I'm like a mystic perennialist. So I fit in with those like academics, who are into perennialism, who see faiths leading to the same goal. Like I don't see Christianity as being inferior to Islam. You know what I mean? I don't take that position. I actually could see, depending on wavelengths, that they're syncretic. But it really depends, because we have a lot of cultural stuff because culture and religion get married together. When a lot of people say, well, look at the Crusades, these were horrible Christian things. I said, if you want to argue them that, it's political Christianity, it's not spiritual Christianity. So these people were people who happened to follow Christianity, but I don't believe they were following Christ or anything that has to do with Christ, or even Apostle Paul or Saint Paul. Like I don't think these are interconnected. So going to the sources, I think when we look at this, a lot of the mystics, and it's actually Shias I would say all Shias are Sufi, but not all Sufis are Shia. So Sufi mysticism fits into
Wait,
Shia.
repeat that.
Sure, all Shias are Sufi, but
All
not all
Shias,
Sufi. hmm
all
Are
Shias are
Sufi,
Sufi. Uh-huh.
yes, but not all Sufis are Shia.
So you're talking
German Shepherd
12.
dog,
I'm talking. You're talking like Twelvers, Ismailis. You would
Ismailis.
put them.
Yeah,
I
I
could.
would say they
I could definitely see it with the Ismailis. They're.
Ismailis are
Yeah.
totally that. The thing is, what I mean by Sufi, like if we're just defining Sufi, it's this idea of having spiritual guides that teach you, that have a connection to the Prophet of Islam. That using that definition, that would fit. But if we're just talking about pure mysticism, Ismailis would be perfectly there. Ahmadiyya fit in. Particularly like Lahori Ahmadiyya, they see Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as a Sufi sheikh. You know what I mean? Um, but it's interesting because people who do this kind of takfir type of thing, they don't understand how dangerous their position is, because it's easy for their own position to crumble. You fairly held Daniel's feet to the fire when he did tahrif, where he was like, well, the gospels are bad and the Torah is corrupted. I'm like, but you're a literalist, boss. You have to believe that these texts are true. A mystic doesn't have the same problem. A mystic could say, yeah, they're true. I may not understand what these texts mean, but the Torah and the Injil are true. The Gospels are true. There's some mystical understanding I don't know, but they're true. Because if you're taking that literalistic approach, that's what it says. That's a part of the creed. You have to believe in the books. You can't say the book is hidden in the heaven, but the Quran is perfectly preserved, but God doesn't perfectly preserve the Torah and the Gospels. That makes no sense.
Yeah, I've
That's
thought about.
illogical.
That's something I've had to think about, because I mean, it seems as clear as day to me. It seems as clear as anything in the Quran that the Quran is affirming not just the initial inspiration of the previous scriptures, but that those scriptures are still authoritative for
Yes.
the groups that they were given to. It seems so
Yes.
clear. Like, I wonder how you can even doubt it, apart from being told by Dawa guys all your life that the other scriptures have been corrupted, and that's why Allah had to give the Quran, because everyone had corrupted all the other revelations. When it's just, I mean, I've got the passages I normally go to, but saying that Jews have to judge by the Torah, that Christians have to judge by the gospel. Surah 5 verse 68, saying that Jews and Christians have no ground to stand upon unless we stand upon the Torah and the gospel, and just constantly telling us, hey guys, you're just picking and choosing in your scriptures. You have to follow all of it. And then, so anyway, I have those scriptures, those passages of the Quran that I go to, but then
You're
there's
right.
just, again, it's like the tip of the iceberg. Like in Surah 2, over and over again, Allah says, hey, the reason you're supposed to listen to Muhammad is he's affirming the scriptures that you have. So, hey, if he's affirming the scriptures you have, why are you making fun of him when he's affirming your scriptures? Which doesn't make any sense according to the Dawah guys, if our scriptures have been corrupted. If that's what the Quran is actually saying, if he's just going if he's saying in a really weird way that our scriptures have been corrupted, it doesn't make any sense. Believe in me because I'm saying your scriptures have been corrupted. That's weird stuff. But
I saw your conversation with Sheikh Uthman, who's actually a South Asian, right? I saw your conversation with him because I saw it on his channel, and they zoom everything, they skip everything you say, and then they basically show him saying, well, did you read this other passage? And I'm like, look, the Christian was owned. And I'm like, what is this? And he actually, he did one thing where he actually has a flaw in his logic. You quoted Abdullah Yusuf Ali. Abdullah Yusuf Ali was an Ismaili, I think. He was a Shia, but he became a Sunni. So I'm like, he's actually wrong. Sheikh Uthman is wrong about that point. He is a Sunni source, so the one who translated the Quran. So I'm like, it's weird. The thing is, it's the no true Scotsman fallacy. What these folks are doing is that they're trying to say, my thing is real and you're not real. And they don't really know anything, because you were asking about Sufi sources. Take Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. He's written many treatises. He's written Sir al-Asrar, Fut al-Ghaib. These are all like mystical texts, and people who read them are like, whoa, this is like, it's a wipeout, You have Ibn al-Arabi, Journey to the Lord of Power. You also have Rumi. A lot of people in America love Rumi. They love Hafiz. They love all these poets, Kabir. They love all of these poets because it resonates with them, because it speaks to a higher level, just like how Jesus talks in the Gospels. It speaks to a higher level of the spiritual level of humanity. Especially like one of my favorite parts that we see like in the Gospels is where I think Jesus fairly challenges the people who accuse him and say, well, there's these people who, what about adultery? What should we do? And and then they bring the woman. I'm like, who's committing adultery with this woman, by the way? Like, that's not thought about. He's like, he who has no sin cast the first stone. It's so beyond. It's a wisdom level, because people are like, I believe in law, and I'm like, well, there's a higher level than law. It's wisdom, applying the knowledge. There's a Sufi mystic named Ibn al-Arabi, and he said an al-Haq, which means I am the truth. What did they do to him? They killed him. Like you said, they probably would want to kill me too. That's fine. I think these people are limited. Anyone who wants to kill me or kill you, they're limited. And it's so funny. You're a satirist. Like, you're Islamicized me. I've watched your stuff. Your boom boom room. It's satirism. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like it, you can write an op-ed. Like, you could do it peacefully if you don't think that satire is good. Mm-hmm. You could challenge it in a peaceful way and say, hey, I don't really like this way that this is viewed. But you can converse with it instead of getting angry and reactionary. But people who are angry and reactionary are infantile. These are people who are coming from an infantile point of view, and I guess they just haven't developed. I pity these people. So,
and it's interesting, going back to what I was mentioning before, because this ties into what you're talking about right now. You've got like the Salafi types and so on, and they would go to a text and be very literal about certain things. But then what do you do when you get to texts that are affirming the Christian scriptures? Well, it doesn't tie together, because you've interpreted this in this way. You've interpreted this in this way. You've interpreted this in this way. And all the interpretations you come up with sort of rule out the straightforward interpretation of this other thing. And so you have to say that over there doesn't mean what it says. All these things, yes. All these things mean what they say. And this doesn't mean what it says. But,
I want to engage that one point that you said. I think it's a really valid point. And this is a flaw that they face with, too, because there's a thing that a lot of Salafis do, which is anthropomorphism. So they accuse Christians and say, well, Christians, you're tritheists. You believe there's literally a father, a literal son, and a literal Holy Ghost. What nonsense is this? Well, I'm like, well, you say that God has a chair. You said God has a throne. God has eyes. God has a hand, a yad, a kursi. I'm like, if you're going to do that, and you're saying, hey, Christians are anthropomorphizing God by saying God is, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, then you are a hypocrite, because you fall into the same pathway. You do the same thing too. And they do that, and they get in trouble because and you could say, well, that's a heresy in and of itself. But if you want to take that literalistic path, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's just
yeah. The only the point I was trying to make was that I have to think, because people always ask me, they would say, David, if you were to convert to Islam, what version of Islam would it be? And most of the time, so for many years, I would say like, Sunni, maybe like specifically like Salafi type. But I had to think over time that that's mainly because those are the guys I'm interacting with. Those are the guys whose sources I'm reading. And so those are the guys I'm most familiar with. I'm not familiar with anything with most of the other stuff. But so they would ask, David, would you be a jihadi if you converted to Islam? Things like that. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is if for some reason I were to become a Muslim, what would I do with this issue of like the Quran affirming the other scriptures that seem to contradict the Quran? What would I do with that? Because I'm aware of what the Quran says. I haven't been trained all my life by Dawah guys to just completely ignore all of these passages in the Quran. So what would I do there? I think I would have to realize what the Quran is saying. If I believed in the Quran, I would have to acknowledge what the Quran is saying, that it's affirming these other scriptures. I couldn't do one of these escape routes where they say, it's only affirming, the original, but not the later. I couldn't go through one of those escape routes. So I was thinking, what would I have to do? I would have to say maybe that Jews and Christians are misinterpreting some things, but their scriptures are good. Maybe they're misinterpreting some things, so you could go in that direction. But then you have clear passages where that seem to contradict the Quran. And if I got to that, and again, this isn't what I believe. I'm thinking if I did conclude that the Quran is inspired, I would think that I would have to sort of put all of that stuff in the context of Surah 5, verse 48, where Allah says that he gave different, he revealed different things to different people so that he would have different groups so that they can compete with each other in good works. And I would have to think, okay, maybe God gave different revelations to different people so that we have to think about them deeply, and so that we end up with different groups and we all compete with each other in good works. But yeah, so I think I would have to kind of go in that route. So I don't know that I could anymore just be a complete like Quran. I'm not sure I could be a Sunni. Like if I somehow believed that Muhammad was a prophet, I'm not sure I could be like a Salafi type anymore, because once you interpret certain passages in certain ways, I don't think you have a legitimate escape route. I think you're stuck.
You don't.
And you're just stuck with contradictions and so on. So I think it would have to do with some, like, God is here and he's revealing things to different people and so on, and different groups and so on, something along those lines. Anyway, yeah, those are just my thoughts.
Going into, I think those are great thoughts. And I think one thing that I think Muslims should focus on, and I always tell this to any Muslim, focus on helping people. You know where I spend most of my days? I go to ministry places. I go to places like a Chosen 300 and Broad Street Ministry, and places like Sunday Breakfast Mission. What do? They help the unhoused. They give people food. They give people clothing. Do something good. This is what I always offer to people. Even if you could do it once a month or once a week. And I'm really so happy that these community spaces do it. And they are primarily Christian. And I think it's amazing. I think that shows your faith. I don't like those people who have those megaphones and they scream hell and stuff. I'm like, do something good. Be good. Don't do, do good. Don't just talk good,
It's interesting. So on the one hand, we're getting comments like Issa is fresh air compared to the Dawa guys. But then you're getting others saying, I think this guy is liar. And
well, I think when a person says that, it's because, see, I'm actually doing social work right now. I'm doing a social work path. A lot of people have, you mentioned that you were dealing with mental health stuff. A lot of people have mental health, but they don't want to admit to it. I think most of us do. We're all plagued with certain elements of mental health. It's a part of being human. And I think it's important that we do what we can to heal our mental health conditions. When people do this, it's because they're afraid. They're afraid of losing their own identity. They're afraid, they have fear, they have their own insecurities, they have their own mental health things that they're dealing with. They're dealing with all those types of situations. And I do agree with this. This is very sad that a lot of people, there's a great sheikh that I wanted to bring up. His name is Ahmadou Bamba from Senegal. And you see, so things like Hamas, things like Taliban, things like Al-Qaeda, Daesh, to me, these people are just, they need help. They need real help. Why would you ever want to hurt another human being? Why would you want to kill another person? You know what I mean? It's sickening. And when these people do it, and I've seen people defend Hamas, I'm like, oh my God, how can you defend these people? And then say they didn't do sexual assault. I'm like, they did. I mean, it's very clear that they did. And it's very disgusting. And it's very horrific. And it's like, and it's so inhuman. And they said, well, they're freedom fighting. I'm like, what are they? They're fighting freedom. They're not fighting for people, and they're stealing the resources. It's a tragedy, these folks. You know what I mean? That people would even want to have anything to do with these people. But Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, the reason why I brought him up, is he never fought. He did the way of peace. So what he did was the French colonists came into Senegal, and he never used a sword. He used a pen, and he wrote these spiritual odes. They're called qasida. So he wrote these spiritual songs about his connection with God and his connection with those with like the prophets and all this kind of stuff, and he's written many, many texts. And what he did was they put him on house arrest, they put him on exile, but he never hurt anyone. He never did any physical fighting. And there was actually another movement. There's a great book by Sheikh Anta Babu that you should read. It's called The Greater Jihad. It lets you know a lot about this teacher from Senegal. But he was completely peaceful, and he won. People who use violence, they lose. You think any of these people are going to be written down in history as good human beings? They're villains. Just like the people in the Russian Revolution, all these people that they do these revolutions, and they use violence and they kill innocent people, they're villains.
That's
This is
something.
not what noble people do.
That's
Sorry.
something I've been thinking about just in terms of um, pragmatic considerations as far as fighting, because you have places where passive resistance um, has been remarkably successful. And so if you look like in the in the 1960s, the civil rights movement here in the U.S. I mean, so you had the Martin Luther King approach, you had the Malcolm X approach, and both of those you could justify. You could justify the more aggressive, more violent approach and say, look, these we got guys who are coming and just beating us up and throwing us in jail over nothing. We have a right to fight back. And if other guys, hey, if they hit you, don't hit back. Do not hit back. And you just think of like what actually changed lots of people's minds. It's all of a sudden people can turn on their television and see what's going on. And they hear about these rabble rousers, Martin Luther King and so on. They're going around doing all this stuff, but they turn their TV on and guys sitting there with their hands up in the air, and dogs are chewing on them, and police are bashing them with clubs, and then they're hauling those guys off to jail.
Yes.
It's just changed people's minds. Just like, wait, why am I on those guys' side? Why am I on those guys' side? But I was actually thinking about that in the context of
Yes.
like Hamas, and just imagine if they had a complete. I think a peaceful approach would get much better results, right? Like, hey, we understand we're in this difficult spot. We understand this is the situation we're in, but I think like they're doing a great job getting like college students riled up and so on. But as far as like really um, winning the hearts of people around the world, I think they do a better job if they weren't launching terrorist attacks. With that said, I could say the same thing about Israel in a lot of these situations. If there weren't such an aggressive response in some of these situations, I don't know. Yeah, it seemed
I
does
think there
seem
was
like
if Israel had what alternative, I think Israel responded the same way the United States responded to 9/11. It was a horrific, traumatic experience, and people have to understand that. People are like, "Hey, they're just so wrong and bad." I'm like, these people faced a horrible, traumatic experience of an invasion. They're in trauma. Was their response the best response? No. I think a better response, if I was the leader of Israel, I would have been like, "Look, hey, Palestinians, you need to take care of this situation. You've got a month to do it, or even 2 months. You got to get all of these Hamas people to us. You bring these Hamas people to us. You bring the hostages to us. And if you don't, we're going to handle it." And I think that would have been a really powerful higher ground position. And they could have won on that grounding. So that's
yeah,
what I
so,
think.
something like that. Because I mean, notice, I mean, I think it's entirely justifiable to say these guys just did this terrorist attack. I'm going after them. And I'm not going to stop until I get all of them. I'm not going to ever allow these guys to be in a position to do that sort of thing again. So I think it's justified doing it, but is it the best, smartest thing you could do? Now, keep in mind, I don't run a state. You don't run a state.
Sure.
We don't have all the
Correct.
information to go on and so
Correct.
on. But yes, something like that, where okay, I'm giving you guys an opportunity to deal with this situation. If you don't, do not complain later when I deal with it. So look, you can deal with it. You can deal with it, or I can deal with it. If you deal with it, then I won't have to deal with it. But you're not going to like the way I deal with it. So fix that.
That would
And
have
so,
worked. That would have
yeah.
worked. I think that would have been successful. I want to engage what this person said. So
Oh, this guy,
this
I can
person,
read it too.
I did read what they were saying. I think this person should use Grammarly before they put it in. I understand that English is not your first language, but it might be helpful. In general, if English is not your first language, use a type of software to help your plurals and stuff like that. I taught English, so as a special ed teacher, so I'm like that might help you. Just
Is this
saying.
true? Are you guys connected to black magic?
So this thing is this is conspiracy theory, obviously. The person says they're connected to women. This person doesn't know anything about Sufism at all. Tasawwuf does have classical roots within the classical. So the thing is, take someone like Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah was a Sufi, and they don't want to talk about that. He was a Qadiri Sufi from the Abdul Qadir Jilani school. They like him because he takes certain positions that
hang on. This is weird because Ibn Taymiyyah, that's like considered the granddaddy of
I know.
Salafis. Like
And
Salafis
so,
love that guy.
yes,
So how's that work?
yes. So this is a part of the branch of like Orthodox Sunni Sufi. So these are the more conservative, on the spectrum. You know what I mean? So he was a part of the Qadari Tariqa, and he had conservative views. But believe me, if Ibn Taymiyyah was here and he saw the Salafis, he would be like horrified and probably ashamed that these people are using his name. It's the same way that I think the Apostle Paul gets used to kill Jews. Like, I mean, if Apostle Paul saw what you know certain Christians did to Jewish people, be like, no, that's not what I was saying, and you totally didn't get what I was saying. I said it's neither Jew or Gentile, and you took it to a different level. Um, but I think he makes the point that Muslims pray near women. I said, what, are you so scared of women? Is this something like, this is a very misogynistic take that people are really terrified of women. I'm like, what, you're going to look at the woman's goody bits? I'm like, you don't have any self-control? I mean, it says a lot about the person. It doesn't say a lot about me, you know? The other thing, it says black magic. Okay. Well, does this person even know magic? Is this a student of magic? Did he study all the levels of magic to make these claims? Probably not. What it is just a deflection. The Quran mentions
Do you guys
certain
do
kind of
do
magic.
do you guys do magic?
What he's probably referring to is there's things that certain Sufis can do that could be called magic. It's the same thing as Kabbalah. Tasawwuf and Kabbalah are pretty much the same kind of thing. So some Sufis use the power of the names of God. So do you know the story of the golem, where they put a name of God into this stone statue? It's actually the first horror movie it's made in Israel, like in the, I don't know, 1910s or something. It's really, really old. It's a silent film. But the golem it's a part of Jewish mythology, and basically what the person did is he used the name of God to summon this golem, and the golem, kind of went. It's like a rock creature, and it kind of went on, like a rampage. But the thing is, some Sufis deal in the names of God, and these names of God have power. So like gematria, like that you see that these Arabic has like numerology and stuff in it. So the idea is that there is some kind of mystical incantations that may be used. Just being honest, but it's within the framework of Islam and the Quran and stuff like that. This person is just afraid. The black magic that's mentioned in the Quran is actually one particular kind of magic, which is blowing into knots, where people blew into knots, and then they kind of like a misunderstanding of voodoo, where they would take the kind of this thread and they would blow into it, and then they would like put it into water, and they would cast spells on people. But that was the particular magic that's addressed to there. But these people are talking about magic. They don't know anything about magic. You know what I mean? Maybe they should go study Wicca. What's the other thing? Makes you not a Muslim, and a little wicked like you makes our religion seem bad. I mean,
Yeah,
what is
and
your
this guy, by the
religion?
way, this guy keeps I don't think he likes Sufis very much, because he keeps posting, and then he says the true Islam is Sunni. Others are fire worshippers. So now you have another accusation that you're worshiping
So,
fire.
first of all, this categorization of Sunni didn't always exist. This person probably doesn't know history either. There was the Mutazilite movement, which was an ultra-rationalistic movement. So Islam has had that, which is funny. I don't know. I think you did a video on like the golden age of Islam, which is, it's debatable. It's a debatable thing. I think all our histories are more, we like to paint our whitewash our histories and don't look at the complexities. Like, for example, people like, oh, the Dhimmi class, like it's this beautiful thing, and I'm like, yeah, it's problematic. It's still second class citizenship. It's
Mhm.
not perfect. But was it better than other empires? Yeah, but it's still not good. It's not good for our. We should never make anyone second class. We're humans. So that's. But I understand it contextually in that time. It's the same way we would look at the Tanakh. There are things that are complex in the Tanakh, and um, so
Yeah, I would like to. I'd like you to, because I still don't know, like,
sure.
what a Sufi would actually do that would be different. But let's go through some comments, and I'd like to ask you about that. The Dawa guys. Sounds like you're not a big fan of the Dawa guys. Um,
No,
this one just asked, is Daniel Hakikachu on Epstein's list?
I think that's the
No,
most sickening
Epstein.
thing.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify.
Sure.
Epstein. Yeah, the Epstein was interested in minors, but like 14, 15, 16-year-old minors. Hakikachu's talking about 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds and so on. So I think that's what's crazy. I think Jeffrey Epstein might hear from Daniel Hakikachu and be like, "Ew, get that freak away from me," or something like that. So yeah, I think some of these guys might be worse than our good friend Jeffrey Epstein. But
That's so
what
funny.
are your thoughts on the Dawa guys? So you mentioned Sheikh Uthman, and doesn't seem like you like the fact that these guys are pretty quick to takfir other people and so on.
I don't like how they attack other religions. Like, I find it so like, when I saw them talking to you, I'm like, "This is abuse. They're abusing you." I'm like, "That is abuse." They're, like, screaming at you, and you're like, "Hey, I have a critique on your tradition. This is how I view it. I see a thing that I would call pedophilia. Can you engage this with me?" And instead, they would say, "I wanna scream and yell at you and insult you." And I'm like, "Well, what you're doing is you make yourself look bad. You make your own tradition." Like this guy, the person who's calling himself Muslim, um, is he's making himself look bad. He's not making me look bad. When people talk rude, I said an idea. Even if you're taking Sunni Islam, there's a concept called adab and akhlaq. These people don't have it. Adab is good manners. Akhlaq is good character. Where is the good character? Where is the good manners? Like, for example, take AP who left Islam. What is the best approach? Do you scream and yell at him and say he's not a real Muslim? He doesn't know Arabic. He doesn't know Quran. I'm like, most Muslims don't know Quran. They don't know what it means. But do you say, "Oh man, why did he leave? What did we do wrong? What did we do wrong? We have to fix ourselves. He left because of us. We didn't do the right thing. We didn't help him. We didn't create the best community for him." They didn't say we're going to take accountability. No, let's blame him. Let's blame Vidu Viz. Let's blame all the people who say I'm not into Islam. You know what I mean? Friendly. What was the? I forgot the person. Like, I don't know.
Oh,
Friendly extremist.
Abdullah Samir.
Abdul Samir.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, these folks, instead of being kind, empathetic, and compassionate and trying to listen to these people, they say, "No, you're wrong. You're bad."
Yeah, it is strange that like like aggression is their only response to any sort of challenges, and they kind of only have two speeds in the cars they're in, either nice or nasty. If you're doing what we want, then we'll be nice to you. If you're not doing what we want, we'll shower you with insults and abuse. Just so everyone knows, Issa's mentioning the abuse. For the record, everyone, I'm not made of glass, so I don't complain when these guys. My only critique is, hey, if you guys are showering with abuse, don't complain when it comes back at you. But yeah, you were mentioning something like, how do you respond to someone like AP leaving Islam? And the Dawa guys, it's to shower them with insults and abuse and condemnations and so on, and eventually even to like insult not only them but their families and so on, go after their wives, all of this. And it's
Do you think they didn't have a good reason that they left? Like, particularly women. I know a lot of women who were abused. They said, "Oh, I'm marrying a Hafizul Quran. I'm marrying someone who is a guardian of the Quran." And then they beat the woman and then take another wife and don't have a job and can't take care of the relationship. The woman has to work. There's a lot of sexual abuse, and I'm like, this is insane. And the woman says, "Hey, I'm done. I'm done with Islam. I'm done with this man. I'm done with this situation." Is she wrong? I don't think so. I think she has every right to have a critique, and she has a right to have her voice heard. That's my opinion.
I'm thinking in terms of, again, just thinking in practical terms, of the wisdom of, hey, when this person does something we don't like, we're going after them in an extremely hostile fashion. That will work with some people. Matter of fact, that will work with a lot of people in terms of at least keeping them quiet. Like, in other words, if you're a person, if you left Islam, they want to keep you quiet. They don't want you to go around saying, "Hey, here's why I left Islam." So they make it known that you're going to have a very rough life if you come out and you criticize whatever your reasons were for leaving Islam. if you start talking about those and telling other people about that, we're going to make your life miserable by constantly harassing you and insulting you. And that will work with some people. I've seen that work with people. They just, look, I don't want anything to do with that, or I don't want to make this public. I don't want people to know, and so on. And that's probably most people who leave Islam. Just, you know, live quietly. They don't become public ex-Muslims and so on. The problem is that the insults can have the opposite impact on certain people. Like, it makes them more aggressive in response, right? So in other words, it's, hey, you know, I'm an ex-Muslim and here are my reasons for leaving Islam. And they come with the insults and attacks, and that makes the person more aggressive in responding to Islam. And I'm saying this because, I'm not an ex-Muslim, but that has happened to me over the years. When I started debating Muslims, I would bring up the, you know, sensitive issues like, you know, Muhammad and Aisha, things like that. I would bring them up, but I would be as respectful as I possibly could when discussing those kinds of things. And you can even go back, like when I wrote an article on Muhammad and Aisha many years ago, I pointed out, hey, guys, you're not adding anything to the discussion by calling Muhammad a pedophile, by name calling. People are just going to turn their brains off when they hear that, and they're not going to listen to you, and so on. So share the information, share the sources. You don't add anything by the name calling. So that's how I was back then. In fact, I mean, I have this is when they were discussing like the Muslim bans in immigration. It was actually like people from certain countries wouldn't be allowed to come to the U.S. for a certain time. When that was all being discussed, I was at a Christian conference, and I don't think I've ever shared the video footage. But so I was at a Christian conference, and it was Christian scholars who were addressing certain issues within Islam. But during the Q&A periods, people would be raising their hands with questions, and some of them were just like basic apologetics questions. And whatever the scholar was, I mean, you're familiar with this. Like, you become a scholar and you like know one thing, in your area that you specialize in. You don't know a lot of other stuff. So apologetics questions would come up. And so you got these guys who are at the podium and stuff, and they're speaking, but they go, they were asking me and Nabil to answer the questions that they had. So anyway, long story short, we weren't supposed to, we were just in the audience there. But later in the discussion, they were having a panel, and the guy walked up to me and he goes, could you guys be on the panel? Because the scholars here keep pointing to you guys when other questions are arising. So anyway, me and Nabil end up on this panel, and the topic gets to how should Christians be reacting to a possible like Muslim ban, or at least a ban on people coming in from Muslim countries and so on. And me and Nabil were the ones at that conference going, I'm like pointing to Nabil. I'm like, okay, Nabil's family came here as immigrants. All right. I'm really glad they came here as immigrants. This is my best friend here. So you got to be careful in who you're saying can't, just you can't come here, something like that. So anyway, we're telling people, don't lump all Muslims together and so on. Anyway, the point was, yeah, the point was that's how I was. I wanted to bring up, I especially wanted to bring up information that I thought Muslim leaders and Dawah guys are concealing from your average Muslim that keeps that person from being able to make an informed decision. Yeah, especially where I think what the Dawah guy is saying actually contradicts what's in the sources, and the person doesn't know it. I want the person to know what it actually says, and that what you're saying is the opposite. So I was like that, but I wasn't like deliberately mean or offensive.
I saw you.
I saw you
talking with Sheikh Uthman. I saw the entire conversation. You weren't incendiary. You were just like, hey, what's going on with these points here? And
well, even then, by that time, I had become a person who would insult in various circumstances, namely when people are crossing certain lines. And so anyway, the point was, if you go back to like 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, and so on, I'm a very different person now. And I have to say, it's in response to other people. It's in response to, you get, death threat after death threat after death threat, and we're going to kill you and go after your wife and do this to your mom and do this to your kids and so on. You just get that over time. And it's like, why why am I being at all respectful with this? Why am I being even slightly respectful with this? You know what? Heck with that. Islamicize me as the response to that. Up, now you're getting Muhammad's boom boom room. Up, now I'm going to post pictures about your. Now I'm going to post cartoons of your prophet and so on, because I learned by experience that if they've absorbed the idea, hey, we respond to you with insults and ha ha ha, we'll go after your wife, and ha ha ha, we'll go after your kid. If you try to just reason with them about that, they don't listen. If you say, "Oh, well, I'll post every time you say that, I'm going to post a cartoon of your prophet,"
Sure.
and then they stop, and it's like, wait. So it's interesting. It's like they're conditioning people to be more aggressive and insulting towards their religion. The Dawa guys are conditioning people that the only way you can deal with the Dawa guys when they go into threat mode and insult mode and abuse mode, the only thing that actually makes them stop is going after is mocking their prophet and mocking their book. And that's when they stop. So notice, I mean, that's the thing. Even if it works with most people, even if most people will say, oh, okay, if these guys are going to come after me and threaten me with death, I don't want any part of that. You get down to a smaller group that responds in a very different way. They don't back down. They say, oh, okay, well, okay, if you're coming at me with like that, well, I don't have to respond respectfully to what you're doing. I'm going to respond with what works. And what works is you guys run your mouths about, sex with kids and stuff like that. I'm not even gonna argue with you about that stuff. I'm just gonna insult your prophet.
When I heard Daniel say that, it made me sick. Like, I was like, I mean, I work with kids. Like, I've done AmeriCorps. I've taught 2 to 3 year olds. I've taught special ed in like high school with 14, 15-year-olds. I mean, just the idea is so sickening to me. And I'll be honest, I mean, like, I look pretty young, for my age. And I've had students who are attracted to me. But I'm like, there's a boundary. This is unacceptable. You know what I mean? Like, I would never allow that to happen because this is an unacceptable type of thing. Because it's not correct to do that to a young lady. But it's just like, wow. It horrifies me. And I wanted to actually address some of those things. So I'm like, well, you're doing satire. Like, it's the same thing with Satanic Verses. People are like, we must kill Salman Rushdie. I'm like, dude, that's insane. Why don't you read his book? I actually read his book. I read the first few chapters, and it's very South Asian.
Yeah, I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into it. I was like, I can't.
He talks about Gabriel Farishta. What is a Farishta? It's an angel, a Persian word. See, South Asian Muslims are Persianized. So that's an interesting thing. South Asia is an interesting place because you have the movement of Sufism, Tasawwuf, and you also have like the Mughals who came in, and there's a lot of problems. It's not just a great history. And when you bring up that Islam has been spread by the sword, it's true to a degree. In the space that Muslim empire was spread, a lot of the people didn't actually want people to convert to Islam because then they wouldn't get equal rights. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've also heard about that. Yeah, with like the jizya and so on. There have been people down
they
over the
want people to be under jizya because it's not just paying money. It's that you have to wear, like the Jews had to wear blue caps and wear different kind of clothing. And I'm like, this is so sad. And the Sufis never did that. The Sufi mystics who were spreading Islam, that actually was a lot more successful, like in West Africa. Like if you read Roots, Kunta Kinte, what happened was the Sufis came through his area and they prayed for rain and the rain came. Whether you believe that happened or not, it doesn't really matter. But that's what happened. That's why the people became Sufi. They didn't become Sufi because someone took a sword to them and said, hey, you'll get equal rights. If like the Asia Bibi case is one of the most horrendous. And this is actually something I think is important to think about. People critique Israel, but they don't critique Pakistan. I'm like, what happens in Pakistan? What happens to people who are Ahmadiyya? What happens to Ismailis? What happens to Christians? I'm like, I don't think Pakistan should be canceled. I want Pakistan to be better. I want Pakistan to be a country that supports and helps the people there. You know what I mean? And that's what I want for Pakistan. And I think if Israel does things that are not right, I want Israel to be a better country. That's what I want. I don't want Pakistan to be erased. I don't want Israel to be erased. But it's a weird thing where people are like, well, Israel should be erased, but Pakistan should be fine. And I'm like, that's not fair. That's not just. You need to be just. And I feel that there's potential. There's so many good people in Pakistan. And it's just so sad what's going on with the government and the things that are happening and the Baluchi situation, the Peshawar situation with little boys, like the Kashmir situation. They're also a big mass exile of Afghanis from there. It's so sad. And I'm like, this can be better. Make it better. Like America, I'm not happy with things that happen in America. Let's make it better. But people are like, no, let's cancel America. I've heard people say, cancel America. America is evil and bad. It must be destroyed because America had done things that weren't good. No, let's make policies that are better. Let's make America a better country for all. Let's make these countries better. That's what I say, you know.
Hey, it's
Sorry.
no, it's kind of funny. Everyone's asking about the Epstein list. So we had is Daniel on there? Then we have is Muhammad Hijab on there? I was like,
I was shocked. I actually, that was one thing. Mohammed Hijab was talking with Rabbi Shmuley, and I really love Rabbi Shmuley, by the way. I think he's awesome. When he said on the show, he said something beautiful. He said, the Palestinian life is equal to the Jewish life. He said, and he said that in the debate. He's like, these lives matter. And I'm like, I'm with you. I didn't really like the Dresden comment, but I loved that comment about, and I understand war is complex. It's just me, I'm a bit of a bleeding heart person. I just hope we can save as many lives as possible. And even in the World War II, I really wish we could have helped the German people to get out of the mind virus of Nazism, you know, because it was a mind virus. Hamas is a mind virus, you know, and I just wish we could get people out of this mind virus of oppression. But, you know.
hey, this is very interesting. New people did show up to this live stream who just don't like Sufis.
Sure, we can take a look. We
I'm
can
saying,
engage with this.
so here we have, why do you perform a demonic dance? Is this Islam?
So this person, again, it's
Do you
like
perform?
saying,
No, that's a different person.
well, I mean,
That's
this kind of argument. You're right. This person's name is Mustafa Abdul Rahman. That's his
do
name.
you perform a demonic dance?
So Mustafa Abdul Rahman does not. This is a straw man, and it's a red herring. And I said, it's the same thing. You could say what you showed and Islamicize me. You'd say, is this what you believe, that you could drink poison and eat ajwa dates? Is it okay to, you know, take a prisoner and use them, extort them for money? You could do the same tactic. These people they're like, it's a glass house. They're throwing stones from a glass house that could be thrown right at them. And I mean, you take the sources, particularly Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah sources, and I've watched it twice. It is rough. It's like it's watching a real. It's rough. I like your outfits though. You get some really nice jubbas and thobes. They're very comfortable, by the way. I like the Moroccan ones. But this argument about the demonic dance, it's like, what is it? Does this person sounds like, you know, like a conspiracy theorist? They're like, oh my gosh, there's something I don't know. Let me insult it. And I'm like, the same thing can happen to you, bro. So I would be careful. Don't throw stones from glass houses. You're talking about like the Helvati Jarahi order in Turkey, where the whirling dervishes they do a twirling type of movement, and it's a kind of a worship towards God. You know, their connection to God and their grounding on earth. And you have other turuk that may do zikr, which is remembrance, and like using God's names, and they may do some kind of dancing. You know, like when a Jewish person is doing they're doing davening, they're praying. They might do like a movement because they're so into that movement. They're spiritually involved. And like in the church, people do that too, where they're like so swayed by the Holy Spirit. They're moving because they feel connected to God. That's what they feel. That's their connection. So that's sometimes what can be engaged with dance.
Somewhat related question. Sharia and Sufi Islam, are they compatible? And here's the thing. I think when most people are thinking of Sharia, they're thinking of a particular kind of Sharia. So is there some version of Sharia that would be compatible with Sufi Islam? And if so, how would that look different from what most of us are thinking of when we're thinking of Sharia?
I think it's the myth of Sharia. Is there really even a Sharia at all? It's mostly people who are like, I want to control people. Let's just be honest. Let's call it what it is. Is there a Sharia state? Not really. These countries are just Muslim majority countries. They're not Sharia. Because like, what is Sharia? Like, I guess you could say, well, the Caliphate did some kind of thing like the Ottoman Empire or Umayyad, Abbasid. They did something like that. Well, nothing like that exists. We live in nation states. So you couldn't even apply a Sharia. Like when Daniel talks about it, when Saul, they're like, we want to have a caliph. I'm like, do you think anybody's going to follow your caliph? Morocco has their own caliph that has existed, and they were actually in conflict with the Ottoman caliph. But they still, their king is still the caliph. So I'm like, do you think you're going to have a caliphate? You're not. And no one wants to follow you because you're gross people. Like we're what I mean by like, people aren't gross, but the ideology is really gross. So, oh,
Um,
I'm sorry, it makes me a little bit sick, but
Yahya says, if you read Islamic sources, you will be Salafi, not Sufi.
that's not
Now,
correct.
well, yeah,
That's
I was,
actually
yeah, I
incorrect.
wanted to ask you something related to that. You could, and I would say it's something like it seems the overwhelming vast majority of people who just like if you become a Muslim or you grow up as a Muslim, you go to the Muslim sources, they tend to not end up as Sufis. You know what I
They
mean?
don't, but a lot of the people were Sufis. The thing is, we have to go and understand we're in a postmodern world. So we have Saudi Arabia that has put out a lot of education, like through their Dar es Salaam publications. So people now believe that that's what Islamic stuff is because we have it through their lens. It's like when you have like a fountain of water and then you have a pipe. That water now has the taste of the pipe. So the pipe, the Arabian folks in a lot of spaces really had no power for many, many years. Turks had power. They were successful. Arabs have had no power. And I think it's really ironic too that how did these Arabs get power? They got power through the British people, the evil kuffar, quote unquote. I'm like, you got power through going and betraying your own Muslim brothers and sisters, right? And then you get power and you now say, hey, I'm the true thing. But I got power through these British people, through you know these non-Muslim people. So also Salafi is new. It's a reformationist movement. It's a new movement that tries to claim that it's old, but it's not.
And it's I mean, you have the sort of proto Salafis and so on over time, but it
Sure.
seemed to really explode in popularity. Again, this is just my interpretation, but it seemed like in the 20th century, um, because I'm sure you're aware. If you go back and look at pictures of people in Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iran from like the 1950s, it seems like they were looking like they were looking like Westerners. They were dressing like Westerners
They
and so
were.
on. Yeah, there
They
were
were.
women were going to school.
Yes.
They weren't all covered up and so on. And then
Yes.
so it seemed like you had lots of people in the Muslim world sort of wrestling with the issue, especially after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. That seemed to have a psychological effect. How did we just get beat? How did we just get beat by these Western nations? That's not how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to be beating them. They beat us. What's going on?
Yes.
And it seems
Yes.
okay. Well, maybe they've got some better systems in place, and maybe we need to start imitating what they've got. But there was a different possible reaction. The different possible reaction was maybe the reason we just got beat is because Allah is not blessing us because we are not devout enough. We are not implementing what He has taught, and so He's not. And we're going to be defeated. We're going to keep being defeated until we actually become like very, 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 very devout, and until we start implementing. And so then you get the Iranian Revolution. As far as Shia Islam, you get the Muslim Brotherhood, then you get Salafi Islam starts exploding and so on as a
Yes.
response that, hey, we need to crack down. It's not we need to westernize or something like that or somehow update. We need to crack down. And so it
That's why
seems
they
like
love Ibn Taymiyyah. They love Ibn Taymiyyah because that's his position. The Mongols sacked Baghdad, which was the center of knowledge. I mean, can you imagine if we had a Baghdad now, the kind of difference of Islamic understanding? These people were into science and they were not into killing. It was a very different world, the world of Baghdad, compared to what is now, even what is Baghdad now. But the Mongols came in, they ransacked um, uh, Baghdad and Alexandria. The libraries were burned. And Ibn Taymiyyah said, "Oh my God, we're not good Muslims. We're not doing the right thing. We've got to follow these rules more." And that's why the folks now love Ibn Taymiyyah is because they're echoing exactly what you're saying. They're like, "Yes, this guy gets where we're at." Even though they don't really get Ibn Taymiyyah, they try to make Ibn Taymiyyah into themselves.
um, I just found out that you're a special agent working with Mossad.
Oh, of course I am. Well, and I admitted that I'm Jewish too, so of course that adds to it too. I know this woman's not going to marry me, so I'm off her list.
Um,
I'm the evil Jew. She's not going to take me, you know.
well, yeah, I'm assuming she's talking about you because she might be talking about me because me and AP definitely work um, for Mossad. Um,
Mossad is just like FBI. Come on, it's so. I saw one guy's like, my shoe is missing. Mossad came and took my shoe. I'm like, dude, Mossad is just it's just like the FBI, CIA. It's literally just that. They did do something that was really intense. Like there's a movie called Munich, and I understand why because the Olympics were invaded and they were attacked. The Israeli Olympic team was attacked, so these agents went after certain people. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but it is an understandable. There is a reaction. There's a understandable reason for the reaction. You know.
mhm. um, speaking of Mossad funding us, let's go through some super chats real quick. Let's go through let's get through some super chats. And again, I did want to ask you because I don't know. I mean, I get a little glimpse, but like, how is how is the life or worship or anything else of a Sufi different from what lots of us would be familiar with?
Sure, I'll
Yeah,
explain all of that. I
yeah,
can
that's cool.
totally work on that.
Good, 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 good.
Um, do you want me to go through the super chats first, or do you want me to talk a
We'll
little bit
probably
about
go
that?
through a few of the super chats because I don't want to get
Sure, I'd
too
love to.
backed up on them. But let's see. We've got Giovanni here. He says, David with the fire. Yes, definitely. Spit hot fire. Uh, let's see. Okay. Oh, this one's for you. Issa, why do you revere a PDF prophet? That's, you know what that means, right?
Thank you.
Okay. PDF prophet who married a 6-year-old, molested grandson, killed peeps, corrupted the Bible and Tanakh, lied about the Trinity, worships a black stone to forgive sins uh, in the Kaaba. So there are a bunch of different issues there. I'm guessing you're not going to believe that some of these things happened. But so I guess the question is, why do you believe in Muhammad when there are various challenges to him?
Okay, so I think for the way I view spirituality and religion is I look at archetypes. So I think that sometimes we get really bogged down by narratives. It's the same way that we can look at the Tanakh, and I think this is one of the issues. So sorry, someone is texting me, and it's my computer's linked to the thing. I try to close it, but you might hear a few ringing, so I apologize for that. But
You're okay.
the thing that I would say is the situation is that people get bogged down by this literalistic thing, and Muslims have a lot of problems. See, the kind of your I guess your traditionalist Muslim has a problem with the Torah for one reason. The Torah fits very well with Islamic tradition overall, except with one thing. They don't like how they talk about prophets. They said the prophets are ma'sum, meaning that they're blameless. They don't have sin. They didn't do anything wrong. So when they hear about Noah drinking alcohol, I mean, like, dude, I'm sorry you guys are so myopic, but you do realize in the Islamic tradition, Muslims were drinking alcohol. You don't think people were drinking alcohol in the past? Alcohol wasn't even banned. And in fact, Islamic tradition took the Jewish tradition, which was you can drink but don't get drunk. That was the initial position. The initial position for Muslims was to pray towards Jerusalem or Quds or Al Quds. It was very much aligned with the Jewish stuff, but people kind of have this amnesia and they're like, oh no, they never drink. And I'm like, yeah, you're retconning stuff that even doesn't work within the traditional story. But that's the thing. So why would I revere? So I see the archetype, and if you take a spiritual level, the mystics view the Prophet of Islam very different than these kind of hadith sources. Um, so they usually have a sheikh that has an inspiration that they're connected to God, and they have that kind of understanding of who the Prophet is through that kind of spiritual connection. But this kind of narrative of the 6-year-old, I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I have a big problem with that. Like there's a lot of Salafis who are so willing to die on this hill. I'm like, no, I'm not dying on that hill. No, 6-year-old's disgusting. No, thank you. I'm not taking it. And I've had people debate me. They're like, no, it's okay. I'm like, I don't take that position. If people want to take that position, that's in their ballpark, but I will never take that position.
Now, is it
Yeah.
the accepting the position? Are you saying you don't believe it happened, or even though it happened, you don't believe that it's good and you're not going to defend it. Which one of those is the position?
Okay, if someone did something like that, it's not good. I'm gonna say that straight up. It's not a good thing, and a holy person doesn't do that. So, and then people say, "Well, it's from the time." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know." For me, from my standard of what that is, that is, it's a very difficult situation for me. But I don't think that this happened. Um, it's hard because the thing is we're dealing with ancient history, so we don't really know a lot of things. We can only, history is very difficult when you're going back 1,000 years, 1,500 years, 2,000 years. We can really just try to do the best we can with it. um like, what I would say, I would make a crack a joke at this. If this hadith is real, I'd say, well, we don't know if she's six. Maybe she's, 15 and she plays with dolls. Like, there's guys who play with My Little Pony. They're 30 years old and they have their little dolls. So, you know what I mean? So I make a joke like that. But yeah, it's very painful for me, this narrative. I can't dig it. I don't jive with it. This idea of harming any child, I can't do it. What the other thing was,
Oh,
the
let me
grandson, yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
let me just comment on that real quick because it actually ties into what we were talking about earlier, that that the impact the Dawa guys have on people is to make people more aggressive. Like if I were talking to one of the Dawa guys right now, and this topic came up, I would probably be blasting him for Muhammad having sex with a 9-year-old girl. Since I'm not talking to someone like that, I can say my confidence in that, in the very story, has changed over time. So when I first heard about Muhammad and Aisha, it was in prison. I thought there's no way this never happened. Someone's making this up. I was like, there's no way guys would, there's no way. I mean, in prison, I mean, the two fundamental rules: don't snitch and don't molest children. I was
Of
like, there's
course, of
no way
course.
you'd have these inmates following Muhammad if they knew he had sex with a 9-year-old girl. So come on, someone made that up. And it wasn't until later when I was friends with Nabil and he's challenging me on things and I started buying the Muslim sources and I started seeing it. And I was like, oh, wait, what's going on here? This is all over Sahih al-Bukhari. It's all over Sahih Muslim and so on. And so from then on, it kind of, you see it so many times in the Sunni sources that it becomes, okay, if I know anything about Muhammad, I know this because this is all over the place. So this is one of the things I know best. So if you're telling me I don't know this, don't tell me you know anything about Muhammad because all your sources are messed up. But was it last year or the year before? I think it was last year when people, I think it's the scholarly Shia Muslims kept bringing up the dissertation of Joshua Little, who did his Oxford dissertation on the age of on the reliability of the hadiths about the age of Aisha. And I saw him posting on his blog, and I'm going to combat Islamophobia by taking away this objection from them. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be hilarious when I read this, because I've seen Sunni Muslims try to get a younger age from their sources. I'm like, you just can't. And so this guy, I'm expecting more of the same, but he showed that these Sunni hadiths are way less reliable than I had thought. So I didn't trust the Sunni hadiths completely. It's clear that some things are being made up in the Sunni hadiths,
Yes.
but I found out they are way, way, way less reliable than even most critics are aware of. Because again, we're always interacting with Sunni Muslims most of the time, and they're using these sources, and so we interact based on these sources. And yeah, then he did a pretty good job questioning challenging the reliability of these sources. And so my confidence in the story of Muhammad having sex with a 9-year-old girl went from, I would have said, like 99% sure. And if I'm wrong, then great. We just don't know anything about Muhammad. It's just a mystery. went down to probably about 50% whether it happened, and that's just because they're right. I'm not sure I can trust these sources, even though there's a bunch of them. They're late, and it's in an environment where people are inventing tons of things, and it's just kind of a situation like I don't know if I can trust in general your sources. And Joshua Little's conclusion was, his conclusion to his discussion of hadiths before he even goes into the story about Muhammad and Aisha is that you need to be very skeptical about any of the hadiths, just the hadiths collections in general. You need to be very skeptical. He believes you can get to things that are true in those sources, but the situation is way worse definitely way worse than Sunni Muslims are aware of, but even worse than what people like me are aware of. And so, yeah, I'm not entirely convinced that it actually happened. But go ahead, continue.
And I love that you said that, talking about the hadith. From excuse me, from when I see the hadith, I think there's some nice things in there, and you should take whatever, like helping the poor and the orphans. I think that's great. And some of like the An-Nawawi hadith, they're cool. Give people good news, have good character. This stuff is nice. But all these stories, I'm like, come on now. I actually studied it in grad school. I studied hadith. And it was fascinating because the idea is you're going to have the Salafi who will hold hadith up, say, look at these hadith. I said, so what's your narrative? Your narrative is about the isnad, and an isnad in English means like a chain, right? A chain of narrators. This is what your science is. You have Sahih, you have Da'if, you have Mutawatir, you have Hasan, you have these different gradations of hadith. Which are like weak, strong, good, all this stuff, multi-chained. But what is it actually telling us? What it's telling us is, hey, a bunch of good people said this. Doesn't tell us if the information is true. Doesn't tell us if we know that this narration actually occurred. We just know there are names. We don't know if this person conveyed this to this person. Sahih Bukhari claimed this in his collection, and that's fine. He had people who claimed that there was this chain. So there's a lot of trust. Also, let's grant those things. Let's say that those are all true. We have the whisper down the lane situation or telephone where, hey, I bring this up. You saw me at the conference. I love Zelda. Zelda's my thing. I've memorized most of the Zelda maps in a lot of these games, like Ocarina of Time, for example, or A Link to the Past. Ocarina of Time.
You ever go back to the originals, or was that too far before your time?
Oh no, I beat both of them. I beat the first one and
too.
the second one. I had a GameCube collection, so they had all the old ones on it.
I just actually had the old ones when they came out.
No, I have a Nintendo too, and I did play them on the Nintendo, but when I had the Nintendo, it just was not very functional. The Nintendo was not, like, you had to blow in it, and it just, the Nintendo games would not turn on. They would be dysfunctional. You know what I mean? So like when I had a Nintendo, I was like, man, this thing is not working. But GameCube did like an emulator of these games, so you could play them on the GameCube, and they had like higher definition. It was really cool. So I played the first and second one, and the second one's really, really hard actually, because you have to beat 2 bosses in a row, and it's pretty tough. You have to the Nintendo games were tough. They were very tough. But I love them. I love all the Zelda ones. I think A Link to the Past is probably one of the best. The first one, Super Nintendo, in like 1991 or 2 or 3 or something like that. It's really, really good. It's a solid one. But the point was, I memorized these maps. But when I started playing the game, I forget some of the parts of the map, right? So then I fill in that information with other information that's not actually accurate. Because that's how our brains work. Like when we have a void of something that's we're missing, we fill it in with something else. How do we know that that's not there? There is no scale or a test to prove this. So people will just yell and scream and say, yes, it's true. The Hadith sciences corroborate the Quran. And you'll hear this yelling. And I'm like, but you have these problems. You don't know if the information is accurate. You could say, hey, they're good people. Hey, they have good memory. I'm like, hey, I have a pretty good memory, and it fails. And and I'm like, if my memories fails, why would can you prove that all these people have exceptional memory? You'd have to test that. We don't have a way of testing that, so it's an unfalsifiable. So I would say we should reject that. Also, the political element, there's 30,000 hadith, so you have all of that stuff. I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. So Joshua Little was breaking it down. He argued that um, early on in Islam, Islam sort of became regional. That there were certain things that they believed. So they, believed in the prayers and so on. And he said, but you ended up with certain centers of Islam that were that had different teachings from other areas. So you had the Medina area and you had the Kufa area and so on. And then it's sort of later. And he says they ended up with very different rulings on all kinds of issues, which actually explains. You could be reading the hadith and it can say one thing, and then it can say the complete opposite a couple hadiths later, in the exact same collection that both are deemed sahih by Bukhari and so on, and they're saying the exact opposite. They're giving the exact opposite ruling. And he explains it. He said Islam became regional, and then Islam starts developing in different areas, and they end up with their own laws. And eventually, they realize they need this like pan-Islam. They need Islam, period. And so people, different areas are competing and so on. And the tendency was, at first you just say, hey, this is the local ruling. When you start competing, you have to trace it more and more back to Muhammad. So you have to trace it back to an earlier guy. No, it's not just his ruling; it's an earlier guy. And then it's basically a call to arms and the way that your version of the story or your political ruling or something like that, the way you defend it is eventually to trace it back to Muhammad and say, Muhammad. So they're basically all doing this and so on. And so once you get that, once you get your mind around that, it's like, yeah, these sources are significantly shakier than I'm aware of. So now I'm in the situation where if I'm talking to a Sunni Muslim who believes what you just said, that they had this great methodology of these guys with these awesome memories, and they had this wonderful, amazing historical method, I'm not backing away on an inch. If anything you just said about your methodology is true and correct, then we know that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl. But if someone is in doubt about the entire system or is aware of some of the problems or from a different group, then I'd say, okay, I'm not holding you to that.
And that's fair. And I think people want these hadith because you said it, like it fills in gaps of information. How do you pray? How do you do all this stuff? And I think maybe cherry picking is not a bad thing. You take what you need and, don't take what you don't need. You know what I mean? But the thing is, since like, stuff that helps you function, like I get it. But like, but then you say, hey, I don't know if it's completely accurate because the Shia Salat is different than the Sunni Salat. And the wudu is different. The ablution is different. The ablution is from the Quran. The Shia use the ablution from the Quran. The Sunnis have a much more elongated ablution where you have to wash your hands 3 times and your ears 3 times and your head 3 times and or an odd number and your feet. You have to do this whole thing. But the Shias have a much more truncated version of it, where it's just like your hands. I think it's like your head and your feet. Like that's it.
All right, let's go through some more chats here.
Oh, did you want me to address the rest of what she said?
Oh, I didn't know if you wanted to, because if you're basically saying that you had some issues with whether these things actually happen, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm a perennialist, so I don't have any problem with people believing in Trinity. This is not an issue for me. The Blackstone, it is weird. I was there, man. God, Seuss. People will fight to get to the Blackstone. They will. I saw it, and I'm like, they'll trample. I'm like, dude.
It is weird. It would be one thing if these weren't the exact same people who are condemning everyone else in the world for idolatry. And it's just like, if you guys saw Hindus doing that, if you saw Hindus like climbing over top of each other, like starting a riot to go kiss a rock, you would instantly accuse them of paganism. You would instantly accuse them of idolatry. And you're doing the same thing that if anyone else in the world were doing it, you would say that is obvious idolatry, and you're doing it while attacking and condemning everyone else.
I think it's sad. I'm like, just to do that to other people, like, and there's not like, and I'm like, dude, you have this multi-million dollar government. You don't think if you want to get people like in an organized line to do this thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you could organize.
You can't come up with a better system. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
after all these years, I'm like, you're gonna have people trample over each other, and it's like this is not good. And I think and this is the point. I believe in accountability. I don't believe in hypocrisy. So there are a lot of folks who are like, "Hey, look at Christianity; it's paganism." But hey, I'm not, and I'm like, no, you have to hold yourself accountable. And when there's issues like this, just be honest about them. So I'm accountable and I'm honest. So I'll keep it. I'm gonna be like Anderson Cooper, keeping him honest. I
Anything
think I
else?
covered that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think I covered that. Oh, and the forgiveness of sins. It says Hubal Kaba. I mean, they're talking about the deity Hubal.
As far as
She talking about?
forgiving sins, I think she's talking about the connection to the black stone. That the black stone is going to intercede for people and so on, and the black stone has been absorbing people's sins, and it was originally
That's
white
why
and
it became black. Yeah.
became black because of
Why
absorbing
did it
people's
become
sins.
black? What isn't that anti-blackness?
It's sin.
Isn't that anti-blackness there? Um, that's very funny. I thought you were against white supremacy. That seems like a very anti-black position. Um, and I also think it's funny. Then why are you attacking Sufi people who are doing their mystical practices, and you have your own mystical practices, Salafi? I think you should chill out. Um, about forgiving sins, I think that's an interesting thing because there's a lot of methodologies that happens. Where like if you fast on Nifsu Shaban or Shabi Barat, like that's a special holy day, all of your sins will go. If you do something on the night of power in Ramadan, it's better than 1,000 nights. So there's other things that happen. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I think for me, I'm going to tell you where I stand on this. I believe in accountability. I'm not going to just do magic tricks to deal with things that I did wrong. I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to do moral self-cultivation. I'm going to be a better human being than I was yesterday. If I do something wrong to someone, then I have to do the work to fix that. That's what I believe. I'm not into just doing magic tricks to stop myself to basically abdicate myself from things that I've done wrong. I have to hold myself accountable. So that's where I stand.
All right, a few more of these. When you inviting Dr. Mordecai Kedar? Still not familiar with him. So, and I don't know if you guys have noticed. I tend to go live with my friends or people I've met that seem cool. That's normal.
I
But
hope I
yeah,
can be a friend too.
yeah, I'm just saying I don't normally let me go around and try to get these guys to join me live. It's normally either like I go live with my friends or meet some like in your case met you at a debate, say, oh, okay, well I get along with this guy so we can jump on live, or it's like or it's someone contacting me. In other words, hey David, I got some stuff I'd like to discuss or something like that. So yeah, no idea when that would happen, Sean. Your favorite Enlightenment thinker, Burke, Lord Acton, etc. I don't know. I guess Francis Bacon was kind of towards the beginning, like Francis Bacon. You know what's weird? I mean, Hume was Hume. Lots of atheists like Hume and so on, but I love Hume. I disagree with him on almost everything the guy says, but I still like Hume. Who else? So what do you got? Locke. Yeah, somewhere in there. Somewhere in the Bacon, Hume, and Locke categories. I'm not sure what you study, Issa. So
It's funny. I actually studied Western philosophy through East. I took a class called the Kyoto School of Philosophy, so I learned about European philosophers through a Japanese lens. It was really cool, like Nishitani, Nagarjuna, who's from India, and then I would
that
like
does sound cool.
look at and engaging them with like Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Heidegger. I really like Heidegger's Thorism concept. I think it's really interesting. Um, I'd say like I love philosophy. I think it's really, really cool. And I like thinkers who are able to think outside the box. And I took a class last semester in ancient Greek. So I was reading Plato's Republic, and I think Plato is on point. I love his engagement with Thrasymachus, where he talks about might is right. That's Thrasymachus' position, and Plato kind of deconstructs it. I like Aristotle. I like the ancient philosophers. So I think they're really cool. And I want to bring one point up too that I think is really funny. I would never debate, is Islam science? I've seen a lot of people debate this, and most of these people are not scientists, which is interesting. I'm like, shouldn't you have a background in science to be able, like, I think Nabil did. He was a medical doctor, so he would have to have a background in science, right? Like biology, physiology, anatomy, all this stuff.
I was sitting.
You know,
I sat through. I sat through Nabil's probably hour and a half, 2 hour presentation on scientific miracles in the Quran and Hadith when he was still a Muslim. In fact, since I wasn't familiar with a lot of the issues he was bringing up from the Hadiths, so we're all sitting there. It's me and Mike Lacona, and I'm guessing my wife Marie was there. But we're all sitting there listening to his presentation. We're asking sort of initial questions and so on. But he's saying how the Quran and the Hadith had established all these things, and I knew he could get away with certain things right there that that he might not be able to get away with if I go look up the passages. So I'm sitting there taking notes and stuff, and then I'm going and looking at this stuff up later on. And then the thing is, I've still got the emails. I've still got the emails of, hey, Nabil, you said this. Hey, I just looked this up. What's up with that? Because you said it's there, but if you go a little further, it says this, which you know. In other words, they will zero in and fixate on something that can be interpreted correctly when you could continue reading the same hadith and then it contradicts everything we know about embryology or something like that. And so I was asking the question, like, why do you say that this proves modern science when you know that 2 sentences later does not line up with modern science? And so we had, anyway, I've still got the back and forths between me and Nabil in my emails of him trying to defend some of this stuff. But
I'd love to see some of those arguments. And one thing I wanted to add to that is the Greek philosophers had embryology. I'm like, if you actually studied this stuff centuries before they had this information. So I'm like, you're saying this is a miracle. I'm like, first of all, a lot of it's vague. So like, if you read the Quran sounds a lot better in Arabic than it is in translation because it has like a rhyme scheme and it's like poetry. It's a lot better, but it's like the science there, it's really vague. You know what I mean? Like you could say, oh, the earth is flat. The earth is a globe. It's very poetic. It's not a scientific book. And the hadith, oh no, we don't want to go there about science. It doesn't tell us science. And you have these scientists who are like, hey, I'm a Muslim, so what I'm going to do is, here's this point, I'm going to make a bullseye around it. And I'm like, oh yeah, you hit it right on the head. But, that's not how science works. You basically took something in the text that's very vague, and then you made it say what you wanted it to say. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that was the first actual, like, detailed argument anyone ever gave me. So I was in prison at the time, but the imam there actually sat me down and showed me this video on scientific miracles of the Quran. It would be like what you're describing. It would say, verse on cows producing milk, and then there would be like 5 minutes of the science of cows producing milk, and then sort of, how could Muhammad have known this, and so on.
And Maurice Bucaille, don't forget about him. If you put the
he's
into
kind of
the water,
he's kind of the one he's the one who set all this stuff off. But what I brought up recently with when I was talking to some Muslims is like the scientific arguments. They're actually destroying the meaning of some of the passages, like Surah 22:5, Surah 22 verse 5, where he says, hey, you're doubting the resurrection. Have you not thought about how you were formed? And it gives what you were just talking about. This would have been like the understanding of embryology at the time. You can point out some problems with it. Like it sounds like you become bones and then you become flesh and so on. So you can point out problems with it. But notice when it becomes a scientific debate, when it becomes a scientific argument, then you're focusing on this does not sound right according to modern science. And so you fixate on that. Right. When the actual point, and I'm no fan of the Quran, but the actual point was a good point. You doubt the resurrection, so you doubt that God can put you back together after you die. Have you thought about how you were put together at first? You think that's too amazing to believe? Think about how you were formed to begin with. Think about how life began. Think about how you were put together in you don't believe that a resurrection can happen? So that's a point where,
wow, you're a good Muslim apologist.
It's like, well, it's like there are certain things in the Quran that I would actually agree with and go, it's usually the stuff that's like on natural theology type stuff where I go, hey, that's a good point. And then they ruin it by trying to make this scientific argument out of it. So yeah.
It's not science. And when I heard that, like, I've watched the debates on Islam and science, and then I heard Nader Ahmed. I've seen him before, and he was not very happy with my conversations. But Nader Ahmed brought up the point about the mustard seed. And he's like, look at this thing. And I'm like, dude, Jesus is not teaching science.
Yeah.
He's like, the smallest seed is not a mustard seed. I'm like, brother, you've totally missed the point. You've missed what Jesus is saying. You missed the boat. You missed everything. And you're focusing on something that's irrelevant, and you need it. Because you have to believe in Jesus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's adopting a methodology that became a thing recently in Islam. So like, what is this? Let's examine this scientific statement and so on. And in passages that aren't talking about science, they're making a completely different point and just saying, hey, you guys, look, think about how you're put together in a womb and so on. And they jump in there and think that this is like a scientific argument or something like that. But then they go to the Bible and they do the same thing, and in order to attack it. And
I heard Nader Ahmed try to talk about,
everyone's constantly missing the points that are actually there. Right.
And I heard Nader Ahmed bring up the Vance Deverin, where he's like, look, the seed is there. I'm like, dude, that is not what it's saying, and you know it. And it's just not right to do that, to be like, hey, look at this thing. It does kind of what I'm trying to make it do. And I'm like, it's a mystical text. And I hate when people are like, let's look at the Gospels and the epistles and let's make them, let's see if they're inaccurate. And I'm like, but that's not the purpose of the text. Like, the point is, like, people are like, look, there's a conflict between how Judas Iscariot was killed, like, or died. And I'm like, look, it's a mystical text. Why are you trying to make this text into this literalistic historical book that I open it up and it's going to mean this thing that I want it to mean? I'm like, it doesn't have to. The point is that Judas Iscariot died, okay? Well, however he died, that's not important. The point is, maybe it's this idea that he did this really terrible thing where he betrayed his spiritual guide, and he had to go throughout this kind of thing. It's the idea that he was so shameful that he had to kill himself, and just the idea that, he bought this thing and then he, everything just spills on the ground. I'm like, why does it have to be reconciled? But I think people are like, I need to literalize this and reconcile it. And I don't think that helps the text. If that helps the person, fine. But I don't think that's necessary into getting the teaching. That's my understanding.
Oh, you had a message from Farfour here. You know who Farfour is?
Yes, I do. I've actually seen it. I've seen Farfour.
In real life? Before he died?
I saw...
Before he's killed? Before he's killed by Mossad?
I saw that video. I saw the video. And I was so shocked. Because, I understood the Arabic. My Arabic's not great, but I understood it to a degree. Where he's like, Al-Miftah, the key. This is the key of my grandfather of this land. And I'm like, first and foremost, if you're taking an Islamic position, you are definitely not going to take the Hamas position. This position is not an Islamic position. This idea of obsession with land, that is not at all what even a classical traditional position is. Total combat. Like, I think it's very funny. People are like, biddah, innovation. I'm like, dude, you have a gun, you have a Kalashnikov, you have bombs. I'm like, dude, you're biddah, man. You're doing biddah. Your warfare is biddah. You know what I'm saying? You have to come out with the sword, bro. Come out with the sword and the bow and arrow. You're tough. The angels will come. The Malaika will come and help and protect you. Why are you coming out with the gun? I just think it's so silly, because I'm like, you believe in innovation, but you're innovating all the time. You're using cell phones, you're using cars, you're using internet. All the people who talk about innovation, and I'm like, dude, you're using the internet. That's innovation. Like, but it's in religion. I'm like, if you read the Quran from a computer, that's innovation. Okay? If you're going and doing a traveler's prayer and you drive in a car, that's innovation. You are doing innovation. So innovation's not a bad thing. Sorry, folks. But I do know about Farfour because I saw it. Oh, this is so silly. I like this person. They're cute. The idea is, in that video, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, dude, it was child abuse. They put a girl there. They put a little girl there to say these horrible talking points about the Yahud. I was like, dude, this is terrible. This is child abuse. But basically, there's this guy. They had an Israeli played by a Palestinian too. Everybody, it's so funny. They have this guy who's a grandfather. It's a human grandfather of Farfour.
Well, of course. Well, you're not gonna have a. I mean, you can't have an Israeli play the Israeli. Right?
Get a Chechen. You could get a Chechen. Get like a Caucasian Muslim. They'll play the part, right? Because they think all Jews are white, right?
We could get Daniel. We could get Daniel Hakikachu to play the part.
But the point was, in the video, like, the guy's like, don't ever give this land to those Yahud. Never give the land. And I'm like, why do you care this much about land? Like, I'm telling you, from my opinion, if someone took my house, I'd be like, dude, this is painful. It hurts. But I'm like, okay, well, I have to go move somewhere else. I got to move on with my life. I don't, this, what is this land going to do for me? It's a piece of earth. I don't own my own body. How am I going to own this earth? I'm a custodian of wherever I live. You know, I don't own things. I'm just a custodian because I die. I'm like, have people not figured that out? Like, you die. You have a mortal coil. It's okay. So all our stuff, it's going to disappear. So we're custodians of whatever we have, you know?
Well, but you've missed the entire point of the entire super chat, which was AP is scared of Issa. AP knows he would be humiliated,
I'm sorry.
vibrated, and destroyed, and that's something that we can all agree on.
You're silly.
AP knew he was going to be exposed. Chloe here says they were not for a man loving a man, but Muhammad was by. Book 38, Hadith 28, market in which there is no buying or selling except for images of men and women. So whenever a man desires an image, let's see.
I think Chloe is a very devout Christian. She is a devout warrior for Christianity. That's what I can see, you know.
Chloe's funny too. She makes some funny songs. She made a video called 72 Space Virgins, and it's actually
That's something I don't understand. Like, how can a man, like, I'm going to talk as a man here, being with, like, having a partner, having a wife, you know, like, that's a sacred bond. Why would you just, like, it sounds so, it's like so demeaning that you just want to have sex with a bunch of people. Like, what about having like a real bond with someone that you really want to share your life with? I don't know. Maybe I'm a big romantic, but
yeah. You have different parts of your. You're mentioning Plato. Plato talked about the tripartite soul in the Republic. So you have your appetites. You've got that part of you, and then you've got the spirited parts. It's not like a ghostly spirited part. It means like the spirit, you know, the part that, you know, gets you revved up and so on. And then you've got your intellectual side, your wisdom and so on. And there is a part of you that there's a part of men that would love to just bang lots of women and so on. But you're pointing out, hey, there's a higher part of you, and that one should be calling the shots, which is Plato's point. There's sort of a hierarchy within you, and some parts of you are better than others. And it's just interesting.
100% agree.
Yeah.
And I'm it's caring about other people, like empathy, compassion. I totally agree. We do have these parts, but we need to focus on the parts that help us be a better human.
Yeah. And so on the one hand, it's like, the way Islamic paradise is portrayed in the Sunni sources. I don't know how much it would differ in like Shia sources or something like that, but in the Sunni sources, it's like a hedonistic. Just every, like all of your lowest basest desires are elevated to everything that you do for all eternity. And so you have that, you've got that, but then you also have to think about it from the woman's perspective. Like, the man gets his wives from Earth, but he also gets these specially designed sex machines for all eternity. And so, like, this is what you do as a woman. That's Sahih Bukhari. What do? You stand in the corner waiting for your husband to call on you to enjoy you, but you're in competition with all these other ladies. It's just like, you just want to kind of ask, you know, Muslim women who believe in this tradition, like, is that what you're looking forward to? Is that what you're looking forward to? I at least understand what the guy is looking forward to in the afterlife. I think they're better. I think there are better things that he could be looking forward to, but I at least understand what he's looking forward to. You're really looking forward to like standing over in this corner, not being able to communicate with the women in the other corners until you stand there and wait for your husband to say, "Hey, come here. Yep, you're next." Wow. God. Wild stuff.
Well, I want to tell you a funny story. So I'm a big aficionado of the Twilight Zone. I don't know if you saw the 60s Twilight Zone particularly. I've seen 80s Twilight Zone.
Picture, if you will.
Yes, that's it. What he says, what Rod Serling said, he had one episode called, like, it's not The Good Place, it's like The Other Place. It has some name like that.
Is that in the pool hall? Was that the pool hall one?
That's a part of it. So it's about this gangster who's like, I'm looking for broads. I'm looking to win all the time because he dies, and
That's what. Yeah,
he has
he
this
dies, and
angel,
yeah,
and he
yeah, I
has an
remember.
angel named
Yeah,
Pip, and the angel Pip is taking him around. He's like, he's like, what I want. He's like, he'll get whatever he wants, and what he wants is like, I want broads. I
he
want to
shoots.
live
Yeah,
wealthy.
he shoots pool, and like it's the best shot
Yeah,
of his life. And then he wants a woman, and he gets a woman. He gets everything he wants. Yeah.
everything he wants. And then what happens at the end is he's like, I'm bored of this place. I want to know about the other place. And the angel says, You
This
are in
is
the
the
other
other
place.
place. Yeah.
This is the other place. And it's such a powerful thing because I think a lot of people's paradise in heaven is actually a hell.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think it's a real hell. That's a hell because the idea that you get everything and there's actually a good story in the New Testament. It's funny, I quote a lot of the New Testament. I'm like, maybe I'm a Christian apologist, but in the New Testament, Jesus in the Gospels, Jesus has an engagement with one of the Sadducees or Sadducees who don't believe in an afterlife. And they actually ask a really tough question, a really good question. I was like, ooh, because this shows that actually Jewish people as a whole don't necessarily believe in an afterlife. Some do, some don't. Even nowadays, it's kind of split. But the Sadducee, the priest, basically asked Jesus, like, well, how picture this. There was this woman, she's married to a man, then the man dies. Then she marries another man. It's the brothers, and there's 7 brothers, and they all die. Who does she go with in paradise? What happens? Where's she go in heaven? And then Jesus is like, oh, it's a good trick. There's a lot of tricks. There's a lot of like philosophical. I'm sure you must enjoy that, those philosophical discussions. And he basically says, yeah, that's not what afterlife is like. It's not this perpetual sex place. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, it's interesting. And I would say that's the same kind of philosophy for Jews too. The Jews who do believe in afterlife believe in Olam Haba, which is the world to come, which is a spirit world where you're a spirit. It's not like you're a reincarnated body as a human. It's a different kind of existence. So I think that's really interesting, the idea of what an afterlife is. Are you a reincarnated human? So it's interesting going to Sufism. You have a Sufi saint. Her name is Rabi'a of Basra or Rabi'a Adawiya, um, who really kind of puts men in their place. It's kind of fun. She has a lot of cool stories, but there's one story where she has a torch and a pail, and she goes around and people are like, why is she holding this torch and this pail? And then and then they're like, what are you doing? And she's like, I have this torch to burn up heaven, and I have this pail to quench hell. And because the only thing I want is God. If I want any of these other things, that's an idolatry. I should only want to be with God and be in the presence of God. And that is what her paradise was. That's what heaven was. It wasn't getting stuff and materialism. It was um, being connected to God. So I think that's the big thing in Sufism, which is very different than mostly your traditional Sunnis. The whole goal for a Sufi is connection with God. It's not about stuff. It's not about I'm getting this thing. I'm gonna invest in the next World Bank where I get a beautiful mansion. And that's how a lot of the Sufis were. They were renunciates. They were like the early church fathers. Like one of my favorite church fathers. What's his name? Father Athanasius. He wrote about him. Anthony. Is it Anthony? In Egypt, the church father from Egypt. I think that's who it is. But he lived in a cave and he was a vegan. He didn't eat any. He just ate bread and water, and that was it. Um, but like really high level mystics. So, and they were just renunciates, and I think Jesus really hits that bill too, because like we see, like when the person, because you have the craving, like you have this person who had a cloak and they wanted that cloak. And Jesus is like, dude, do you have to give it up? Give up. It's easier for a rich man. It's easier for a camel to enter an eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And it's not about having stuff. It's about worshiping the stuff. Living your life and paying bills is not the problem. The problem is where you start to worship this money and you think that the money is more important than anything else.
Um, wanted to get
Sorry.
to the one after this. This is Sarah from Al Aqsa TV. So that's the one you were saying
Oh, was that
was.
the young lady? Oh, the young girl. Oh my gosh.
That's so. This is a parody. This is a parody. She said, "I heard Sufis like to dance. Farfour likes to dance. So Farfour is a Sufi. So Sufis have the tightest leather straps. Now everyone do the Farfour dance." So I'm sure you're
That's cute.
familiar. Since you've watched this channel before, I'm sure you're familiar with the the eyes being the leather straps of the anus. Is there a mystical Sufi interpretation of that, or?
I actually had never heard that narrative until you had mentioned it. Could you talk a little bit more about it? Like, what does it mean exactly? Like, I had never read that
Yeah,
tradition.
I had to actually go through some commentaries to figure it out. AP was trying to explain it to me, but I couldn't get it. But yeah, so the leather strap referred to the leather strap that sealed a water bottle, right?
Ah,
And so
okay.
they're all familiar with this. If your leather strap is loosened, then your bottle's going to leak.
Sure.
And so Muhammad's saying that the eyes are the leather strap of the anus, meaning that while you're awake and alert, you have mental control. Your what comes out of your rear end is under the control of your will. Once you
Yes.
close your eyes, and
The
you're
leather strap is
asleep,
gone.
yeah, and so and you don't know what's gonna leak out, and so yeah, it's kind of an ongoing joke. It was like, was that really the best way to get the point across? Because
That is
notice
it's
it's
wild.
another situation where, okay, it's perfect, it's a perfectly valid point. You don't know what's coming out of your rear end if you're asleep and stuff like that. So why don't you wash up? Why don't you wash up in the morning or something like that? So I don't know. But yeah, it became a kind of joke around here. Here anyway. Here's a question. Why do you believe in your faith? You've addressed this a little bit along the way. Why do you believe in your faith? Why is it true? So if someone said, "Hey, you've shown us your position. Why do you think that your position is true?"
I think it depends on how we define truth. So I take, if you know about perennialists like Rene Guénon, Said Hussein Nasser, there are a lot of people where you can see that there are multiple truths, instead of one truth. I like the story of like the life of Pi, where in the beginning the protagonist goes and sees the truth in all these spiritual traditions. So to me, I don't. It's like I'm not really in a limited space for this kind of thing. Like, do I think it's true? Sure, but do I think Christianity is true? Sure. Like I don't think they're mutually exclusive where I stand versus where other people stand. But I think it really just depends on your perspective of pluralism. I'm a pluralist, so I don't this is not something that I face. I know people have a problem with my position. That's okay, they can. That's why I like a Salafi, like your friends with the chatters who not your friends with the chatters here who have the Arabic names like Muslim and Mustafa, they have a problem with me because my position cannot exist for them. Because if I have my position, it challenges their position to exist. Their position can exist while my position exists in my worldview. I don't like their position, but I could say it's a position that exists. It's not for me. I don't like it. I don't think it helps society. I don't think it helps humanity. And I don't even think that it's absolutely right. I think it has flaws. My position can have flaws too. I'm fine with my position having spaces and gaps of understanding, but I'm like, everyone's position does, so I don't have that problem.
Chloe here says Isa from the Quran is not Jesus. It is a corrupted rumor, turning our God into a mere prophet, just as Muhammad believes Mary is part of the Trinity. Dumb. There's a related super chat here.
I want to engage that part about Jesus, but yeah.
Yeah, and here, what is his version of Jesus on the cross? So this is connected with the issue of Jesus, and asking that because it's the standard version is that Jesus never died on the cross. Allah replaced him with someone else.
Unless you're Ahmed, yeah.
We've pointed out many times it's not what the Quran actually says. 4157 can be read in different ways.
I agree.
You've got Ahmadis who believe that he was crucified in the sense that he was nailed to the cross. But so when the Quran says that they didn't kill him or crucify him, the Ahmadis will say, well, crucified means to kill by crucifying. And therefore, even though he was nailed to a cross, he wasn't crucified because he didn't die. And then you have Ismaili Shias who generally believe that he was crucified and killed. They interpret 4157, and I'm about to put out a video on this, basically explaining that there are different views within Islam, but they'll interpret 4157 in light of certain other Quran verses like 817, where Allah says, don't say that you killed those guys in battle. You didn't kill them. It was Allah. And so they'll say, okay, I mean, what are you talking about? You ran out there and you swung a sword at a guy in battle. And he's saying, don't say you killed him because it was Allah. It was Allah doing it. And
I
so
agree.
they interpret 4:157 in light of that, in the sense that the context of 4:157, it's not responding to Christians. It's responding to Jews of Muhammad's time. So Muhammad goes to Medina and he tells the Jews of Medina, those tribes, that they also have to believe in Jesus. And their response is, "What Jesus? What? We crucified him. He can't be. He's not the Messiah. He's not our Messiah. Our Messiah is not going to die." And then so they're giving as their proof that you can't trust Jesus. They're giving as their proof the claim that he died. And so Allah's responding to that, and it says, no, you didn't. So how? We don't have to believe in him because we killed and crucified him. And the response is, no, you didn't. Allah raised him up unto himself. And so most Muslims just go with reading 4:157. Oh, it says they thought they killed him, but they didn't. And they think, oh, Jesus never died. And so Allah raised him to himself means he just took him away. But you have others who are reading in the light of, a different light. Wait, Allah's responding to people who are saying, we don't have to believe in Jesus because this happened. And then they read it as Allah responding, no, you didn't. This is part of Allah's plan. This was Allah doing it, and Allah raised him up. And so there are Muslims who believe that Jesus was actually crucified and raised. They would disagree with Christians on other issues. But do you have a particular view on any of that?
For me, I think it's I'm kind of like your mystic academic type of person. I see it as a very powerful spiritual narrative. Like, I've read Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. I took like classes on graduate level classes on Christianity and stuff. And like, the way that I view this type of thing is, this is a powerful narrative for people. And I do think it's really not right when people say, well, my narrative is so much better than yours. And I think some Muslims don't understand this. They come and say, well, how dare you say Jesus was crucified? I'm like, but you're insulting all these Christian people who do believe this. You're attacking their faith. You're saying, well, because my faith is so much more important, my faith is true, and your faith is wrong, I'm okay to condemn your faith. I said the crucifixion of Christ is the central point of Christianity, in my understanding. I'm a humble person, I don't know everything, but my understanding in Christianity is that the point is, you have this innocent person, this innocent entity, I should say, who just lived life as such a wonderful person, who always helped people, always did good, and then sacrificed their life for everyone else. That's my understanding. I think that that's what I understand Christianity to be. So to say, hey, this didn't happen, it's like when you watch like an anime, for example, and then you just resurrect the character. Let's say Goku died in the anime. What impact does that have? Then Goku just comes back and that's it. He just, it lessens what that means, what that death means. You know what I'm talking about? Like, when someone actually dies and they really die, it's a very different kind of feeling than, oh, they died, but they just came back to life. They get a free jail card. Like, they just get resurrected. Like, yeah, it doesn't have that same meaning. And yes, well, people say, well, that happened in the resurrection. But I'm like, yeah, but the form of the Jesus in the resurrection is different. This is one where he has the holes in his hands. It's a Jesus who had actually died from the crucifixion. So it's not just like, oh, Jesus came back and all the things are healed and he's back to normal again. You know what I mean? So it's different. It's a very different kind of narrative, and it has a very different kind of impact. So to say, hey, Jesus didn't die for my sins, Jesus didn't go through this process, it can be very painful. It's like really discrediting the theological approach of a Christian. It's very hostile. And I think a lot of Muslims don't understand that, because they don't understand the meaning of what that crucifixion is for Christians. Is that fair, do you think?
You're just
like the Christian
you're explaining your position. That's
and trying to explain the understanding. And what she had said, about Jesus.
Back to this because you said you wanted to address it.
So Jesus in Greek, as a person who's studying ancient Greek, I love that, it's so fun. It's Jesus. So this is where I think the term Issa came from. It came from Jesus. That's my understanding. It's a translation of a translation,
Yeah,
like yeah,
you have a couple different theories. I don't think she's just focusing on the name. I think she's talking about Jesus
the
sort of
concept.
being a prophet of Islam. Because yeah, you're right. So you have different theories. You have one that it's a transliteration of the Greek that went through a
That's what
different
I think.
language and then into Arabic. And then
That's what I think.
you have another theory, which is because the Arabic for Isa is actually similar to what the Arabic for
Esau.
Esau would be. So you have some people who would claim
People called me
that
Esau before. I've been called Esau
you have some
before.
people who claim that Muhammad isn't interacting with a lot of Christians. He is interacting with more Jews. And so one theory is that there were just Jews who were calling Jesus Isa, but like the Arabic version of Esau, because that was an insult. Because Esau, the people of Esau had become the enemies of the Jews. So, because keep in mind, we don't know. We don't know. We know that the Quran is using this name Isa, and so
Sure,
there's a question of where it comes from. And I think I've read like 3 or 4 different theories on where it came from. But yeah,
that's fair.
I think Chloe's referring to like the concept of Jesus in the Quran.
And I think I addressed that in the other point where I was like, look, I don't think Muslims understand that. Muslims, I think, can just say, hey, for me, Jesus is a prophet, without telling Christians, Jesus is a prophet for you too. Because it's not, I do a lot of interfaith. So I go to like high level places where you have like ambassadors, people from other countries. I do a lot of stuff like that. So I do a lot of like high level interfaith dialogue, like nuclear non-proliferation. I've been in these places, and it's a very different level of dialogue. A lot of the dialogue that I see in these places are street preachers, but the idea is that there's accountability, there's a way of honoring different traditions as well as honoring your own. That's a big thing in interfaith dialogue. You don't have to change your faith to dialogue with others. You can say, I have my faith, I have my tradition, and I can see your tradition, but I'm still going to be in my tradition. But the point is that needs to be respected, I think, for Christians. To not tell Christians, hey, Jesus is a prophet, that's insulting to a Christian. I get it. You don't need to tell a Christian that. For you, Jesus is a prophet, and that's fine. But don't tell the Christian that Jesus is their prophet. That's what I say.
Um, this is a completely different. This was a question from earlier, but Sean here says, "Where's your mother from?" So I guess the question is like,
Right.
what's her background? You mentioned she's Jewish,
Sure.
so where would she be from?
So my mother's family came from Eastern Europe. So I could be perfect for Bollywood because I'm a light-skinned South Asian person. My family came from like Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Hungary. There was a thing called the pogroms there, so my family became refugees into the United States in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I actually found their names in Ellis Island. I found my ancestor Fanny Cohen, who was Fanny Heimovitz then. Funny enough, very Jewish names. Um, and um, that's my mom was a hippie in the '60s. So she like explored all the spiritual things, and she has a book, and it's pretty cool.
Hey, this is actually funny here. So Sarah said, since Ustad Isa is all about esoteric knowledge, can he guide us into greater understanding of the hidden mystical meaning of Mishkat al-Masabi 3:15? That's funny because she posted this before I said it, but that's one of the passages with the eyes of the leather strap
Oh, really?
of the anus. Yeah, so
That's funny.
she got the same idea. Is there a deeper is there some hidden meaning to this? Which I didn't think there was. So
I mean, I think if I were, let's say I were to take a shot at it, I would say like a deeper understanding is, you know, um, make sure that you're kind of aware about how you're sleeping and resting and making sure that you're spiritually attuned with where you're at. Because at any moment, your kind of desires and your body may do things that you don't want it to do. So just have an awareness of your limitation. That's the way we could do it. It's an awareness of your limitation. You're a limited human, you're imperfect, and you have to understand your limitations. How about that?
uh, have you ever studied Judaism? Sounds like yes.
Oh, 100%. I went to Jewish camp. I did all of it. I did a bar mitzvah. I did everything.
Nice.
I see. I'm a mystic, but I'm very Jewish too. So like, the Jewish stuff is very important in my life. I'm not. I think that's. I'm not going to deny that. But and that's the thing. Like, it allows me to understand the New Testament. It actually allows me to understand Islam in a way that a lot of Muslims don't understand, because guess what? Who are all the prophets in Islam? They're Jewish people, unlike our good friend Imam Bomer, who believes that they're all Muslim. He thinks Jesus is. I was on his channel. I'm like, my man, please don't say Jesus is a Muslim. Please don't make that argument. It's not going to work. And he's like, be a reader, not a repeater. And I was like, oh man,
Yeah,
but
what is that?
you're repeating the same point. You are being a repeater. And then Matt
Yeah,
Dillahunty
pretty
came
bad.
in. You remember that? Are you a Muslim too, David? I think
Yeah.
according to that, you are a Muslim.
Yeah. Yeah. We
Poor
all
Imam Bomer.
we all are in one way or another, according to that bit of reasoning. You did have there's one good coming up. Might have missed it, but what is his opinion on Aisha? Yes, we are already through that. Here we go. Is Sufi, this is kind of what I wanted you to, is Sufi kind of like Kabbalah, any really weird or occult seeming mysticism in Sufism?
I would say Sufism is very much aligned with Kabbalah, and I don't think Kabbalah is this weird, bizarre thing. Kabbalah is focusing on the names of God. Basically, the whole thing is a connection to God. That's the goal of Sufism. That's the goal of Kabbalah. And it's using names of God to have this connection. So where does the term Sufi come from? It comes from the word suf. A suf was a woolen robe that mystics would wear because they were being ascetic. They're saying we need to be in the world but not of the world. It reminds me exactly of, again, I'm going to bring up the Gospels because most of the audience here is probably Christian. So the render unto Caesar what is for Caesar, but render unto God what is for God. So the idea is you live in this world, but you're not of the world. The point is you're supposed to be focusing on God. You're not supposed to be focusing on materialism and focusing on just like getting stuff. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying getting stuff is wrong or bad, but the idea is that your major focus should be on God, and you need to compartmentalize it. So, yeah, I would say that it's deeply interconnected. I don't know what a cult is a weird thing. Are some Sufis a cult? Yeah, you could say probably. Like when I think of the word occult, you mean like people who like worship their teachers and do things like stab themselves? Yeah, you have some Sufis who do that. You know, like some people actually from who are students of my ancestor Rifai. Some of them stab themselves and like in their eye. It's a little bit weird. You have have some people who might smoke marijuana. That might be a part of their spiritual practice. But it's a vast thing. Like in Christianity, you have Pastor Anderson who has his opinions on things, but most Christians do not agree with Pastor Anderson. But he has his views.
Here you go. Sufism is so ridiculous. Its peaceful spiritual nature is counter to Muhammad's writings. Also, God doesn't exist. This is one of AP's fans, one of AP's atheist fans here.
Okay, my question is, what does something mean to be ridiculous? For some people, scientism is a ridiculous concept where people worship this thing that's always changing, and people act like it's this concrete thing instead of a tool that we as humans have. Like, we can call anything ridiculous. You could say, hey, whatever ritual we as humans do is ridiculous. I find it to be so reductionist. I don't think it's a helpful way to engage the world. It's not a helpful way to engage humanity. And it's like this really, it's a very cynical worldview. It's like, hey, everything's crazy, but I'm smart. I'm better than all these people because you know what? I've gone beyond these crazy barbaric thinkers. Like in Star Wars, I played this game called Rebel Commando, and in the game, your character, you find a lightsaber. They're like, it's that old primitive archaic Jedi religion, and I'm like, why are you so dismissive of things that aren't for you? Can't you just say, hey, this isn't for me? But I can kind of honor and accept where that place is. It's a different path than my own. It just seems hard for some people. They have to be smarter. They have to be better. They have to be greater. Like, yeah, I don't think that's helpful. And it's counter to Muhammad's writings. You engaged all of this stuff. I'm surprised this post was here. We don't even really know if Muhammad said these things, if the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, said these things. We have no idea. So you're saying that this person is assuming that they're 100% factual. And I'm like, well, we've just gone through the science. Is it? We don't know. So this person is making an assumption to make their claim. So I think that needs to be I think the person should have a little more humility. That's what I would say.
Yeah, in your face, Sean. Think I'm going to defend you? Talking trash. Ayatollah here says, yeah, terrorists need help of D's. What's wrong with this guy?
Oh, that's cute.
Obey here says, it seems likely you're rejecting your prophet and leaning towards following Jesus.
I think that I engage these types of situations. I mean, again, the point is you're saying following the prophet. Well, that is assuming that all of these traditions are what they say they are. People have different views of who the prophet of Islam is. Mystics have their own view. They have their own inspiration where they have their teaching of who this person is. You can then take the hadith, and if you want to take the hadith literally speaking, that archetype is not an archetype for me. That's what I can say. A person, I don't believe in killing anyone. I'm very anti-imperialist and hurting other lives. I'm very, I guess you say, quote unquote, pro-life. I care about life very much. And the dignity of human life is very important for me. And I don't know, I would do whatever. I actually like the story. And I definitely, you could say I'm a follower of Christ. I don't have any problem. I think I try my best. I love the teaching and the wisdom that imparts. Like, for example, I think of the Garden of Gethsemane, where there's this, Simon Peter, they say that he may have been a zealot, like a military, like the military movement of against Rome, where they would carry like Sycharites, they would carry knives and stab people. But he tells Peter, where Peter cuts off the ear of this guy, they said his name was Malchus, and Jesus said, this is not the way. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. He takes the ear and he heals the person. I'm like, that's how I want to live my life. And I get angry and I have my problems and I'm an imperfect person. I'm like, that is definitely my ideal. That when something terrible happens to me, I want to react that way. You know what I mean? And it's not easy because we're human. We're going to get angry, we're going to get reactionary, but I definitely like that ideal. And there are some stories in the tradition, like, for example, the Prophet of Islam, his uncle is killed, Hamza, and which is so weird. In the Message movie, they have Hamza showing, but they don't have like the Sahaba, like Imam Ali. They don't have these other people showing. They just have certain people. I think that's interesting. But Hamza gets killed by this man named Washi, where he throws a spear at him, and instead of like saying I'm going to kill this person, he basically says, I can't see you, but I'm going to forgive you and not kill you. And I'm like, I think there are places that you can find that. I'm not saying it always is that way, but there is some space for it.
SK here says, love the guest today. Wish all Muslims were like you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you too. Thank you.
And then five silver pesos says, now I see why AP sat this one out. This sounds like a TED Talk. What's that mean? What's the TED Talk mean?
I guess maybe
this is from earlier. This is from shortly after we started. But what's that mean? What's that mean? The way you're talking or like your message?
I think probably both. That it's like, man, I'm bored with this TED Talk here. It's too academic for me. I want to see some fire and brimstone. That's one of the problems people complain about my debates. Like, every person I've had a conversation, we've had no fights. Like, it's all been really calm and cool and good. I had one of the last Matt Dillahunty. I probably was the one right before Andrew, Matt Dillahunty debates. And it was really easygoing and it was smooth. And yeah, like, I've never had any problem with any person I've been with in conversation because everybody's willing to be respectful. And that's actually why I became a debater. It's like I was so horrified from what I saw. I saw all these people yelling at people and screaming and saying how dumb people were. And I'm like, if you're going to represent Islam, everybody's going to run from Islam. They're going to say, this is a nightmare. I want to get away from this. This looks like a horror film, this, whatever reality these people are in,
Yeah, that is an ongoing concern that debaters are judging their debate performance based on how their sort of crowd of fans reacts to it.
Yeah.
Right. And so like Daniel Hakikachu's fans, he'll go on and do a debate and his fans will, wow, what a great job defending sex with minors when everyone else is watching going, oh my goodness, it really teaches this. This is really, this is real. This is a real thing. And so, same thing with like Muhammad Hijab when he goes on. He's debating Rabbi Shmuley, and it's oh, what about the vibrators and the dildos and the lube and
But
stuff?
what
And
he's doing is fine.
his fans are cheering for him like crazy. That's so wonderful, great job. You really put him in his place. Whereas other people are like, oh my goodness, this is the guy they got. This is the guy they got to represent Islam in this. Wild
Rabbi
stuff.
Shmuley is an Orthodox Jew. He is frum. He is devout. His daughter is not saying anything bad. What she's doing, I saw the website, by the way. It's a website for like married couples. That's what it is. And there's nothing like illegal or wrong for married couples to do things within their in the confines of their marriage.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's what she's
and
doing.
it's, I mean, for me, the takeaway is one, you've got Hijab talking about all these things, but two, like as far as his preparation must have gone, it's, oh, hey, I just found out I'm going to be debating one of the most famous rabbis in the world. Everyone, go search for his family. Like look up his family to try and find something I can use in the debate. And it's like, why would you want something that you could use to throw off the debate? Yeah, it's just
And they've also brought up the IDF, and I'm like, dude, the IDF is just like the army. Like, give it a break, man. Like, people are like, oh my god, the IDF are these evil killers. And I said, if the IDF did something that's questionable, right? The thing is, these people are under extreme trauma. Like, you're not like, it's like, hey, if it's a Jewish person, I can't have empathy, I can't have compassion, I can't have understanding, I can't understand where these people are coming from. No. And I'm like, dude, I completely get the Palestinian point of view. I see it. I'm like, yo, this is horrible and it's terrible. But to just say, hey, I'm going to blame Jews, I'm going to blame IDF, I'm going to blame Mossad, I'm going to blame Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm like, Benjamin Netanyahu's brother died in like from these situations. He's traumatized himself. Do I think what he did was right? No. But I think the thing is we have to look at the complexity of what's going on here, you know, and I think that that's lost, particularly in diplomacy. We just want to get angry, want to get mad. We want to say these people are bad and these people are good, like a John Wayne movie. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Along those lines, we have Swiss Apologetics here says, Issa is a very nice guy, but I'm missing the action. Can you bring Captain Golden Shower on again? That's Muhammad Hijab. Just kidding. God bless you guys. Great conversation.
Oh, man. Thank you. No, that's so funny. Was Muhammad Hijab on here before?
No, but he's welcome to join us anytime. I mean, as far as the golden showers, he was in the chat that day. He just kept posting messages about golden showers.
Why would you say that? It's such terrible character, and it's like, I'm like, dude, it's like,
again, not for his crowd. That's the thing. It's people are getting like their crowd and what's cool to say in their crowd, and then they judge their performance by how their crowd reacts. And yeah, golden showers.
I just, it's so sad. And it's like every time I have like even conversations about like dealing with Palestine and Israel, people are like, it's apartheid. Like, how are we going to have a healthy conversation if you don't really want to have a fair thing? And I'm like, that's the sad thing. Like when I think Piers Morgan was fair, he's like, what do you think about Hamas? And he's like, I'm not saying anything. I'm like, you should say something. These people murdered, they assaulted. Whatever freedom they're fighting for, they shouldn't be freedom that you're fighting for. These are not your friends. I hope they're not your friends. These people did terrible things. And it doesn't mean what the Israel government did was perfect or right or the best. We already offered another solution, but it was a very traumatic situation that occurred. But I'm like, to say that these people, they said, well, 70 years ago, there was occupation. I'm like, you know what? You don't assault women. That's just, you don't do that. You don't kill innocent people. You don't do these things. And also, guess what? Here's another point that I would say about Hamas. Sorry, I'm going on this point, but I'm like, they're a failure. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba beats them out completely. Like in his revolution, he succeeded. What did they succeed in? Nothing. Many Palestinians are dead because of their actions. What good have these people done? Nothing. They have stolen resources. What has Taliban done that's good? These people have not done anything good. And then what they do is they do this fraudulent thing where they give a piece of bread. They're like, hey, you know, like when you think of a dystopian future like Brave New World or 1984, these people give a piece of bread and say, hey, your life is good. I'm giving you a piece of bread. And I'm like, this is manipulative. You're not actually helping people. You're trying to keep people compliant. And you're trying to blame the people who aren't actually doing the bad thing when you're actually doing the bad thing. So, you know, sorry, I didn't mean to go on that tangent,
No,
but
there's some comments coming up about that a bit more. There's this. Please pray for lovely guests to come to Jesus. So there are people who like you here. Um, two from Chloe. These are back to back, and they're sort of on a related topic. Stop trying to defend. This is from earlier, not from right now. So this must have been what we were talking about earlier. Stop trying to defend Palestinian cowardice. Muslims like to defend each other and blame the Jews for their own actions. Why else are so many Muslims riled up worldwide? Gazans equal Hamas, kids of Farfor. And then if you ran this state, you would do this or that. Cowardly Palestinians had 20 years to stop firing rockets and digging rat tunnels. Stop throwing rocks. So yeah, along those lines, I mean, a lot of what you're saying is basically trying to like understand the different sides. And so you're pointing out, you understand IDF soldiers, you know, and like their mental state. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand because, you know, Israel eventually put fences and stuff to fence off certain areas. Before they did that, which is relatively recently, they were having constant terrorist attacks, right? I mean, because anyone could just walk up from like the West Bank. It could just walk up a hill and go blow up a cafe or a bus or something like that. And it was like it was nonstop and relentless, killing people in you know, just who are in a cafe or something like that, or killing people in a bus. That messes with you psychologically over time to the point where you're like, yeah, maybe we just need to get rid of all these guys and end all of this. But it's something similar for you know, for Palestinians, that hey, every time this terrorist goes up and does something, a bomb gets dropped on us. I don't like those guys. I don't like those guys who are dropping those bombs in response. So this isn't to defend any particular action, it's to understand if you, and the way I was discussing when this first started when it was first breaking out, was I described it in terms of like prison life, that you know, you're in prison, we're in prison, and I mean, inmates are fighting all the time. All the time. You've got Christian inmates, Muslim inmates, atheist inmates. You've got people from every different background. You got guys that are pure evil. You got guys that made one mistake, right? That did one stupid thing in their life, and then they went to prison over it. So you've got guys that are like chronic compulsive manipulators, and they're really, really bad people. And I can say some of the best people I've ever met in my life were other inmates who did something stupid in their lives. But at the end of the day, once you've been in there a while, you start viewing the administration, police, COs, courts, they're the enemy. This is our community. Even though we disagree all the time and guys are fighting left and right, everyone there understands they are the real enemy, those other people. And that's so weird, because guess what? You've got really good you've got really nice prison guards who will do anything to help you. You also have evil, sadistic prison guards who get off on abusing people and so on. And you start remember, when you think of who the prison guards, I made a video on this years ago called Why Some People Hate Cops or something like that. And it's, you have interactions with these guys all these times. Who do you think of? Your brain is meant to, one of the main purposes of your brain is to protect you from danger. And so when someone from a group does something horrible to you and there's nothing you can do about it, that stands out in your mind. If you could have 20 nice interactions with totally nice police officers. One police officer shows up, beats the crap out of you for no reason, and then throws you in jail and lies about you and stuff. That's what sticks out in your mind. That's when you start thinking about cops. And so the sort of so anyway, I'm applying that. I know what that's like. I know what it's like. It took me years. Where when I would see a police officer, and keep in mind, I mean, you know, I became a Christian in prison. I became a Christian in jail, but I was living as a Christian in prison. So I mean, squeaky clean. I was squeaky clean when I get out. I'm not committing any crime. it was very difficult for me to walk past a police officer and not just like want to knock him over. Just
Yes.
because that was you're conditioned to think of these guys as the enemies. And so I'm thinking of all, and it's situations where uh, a police officer could be totally nice, and an inmate could be a total scumbag.
Yes.
I would side with I would have to side with the inmate, and
I
that's
get
just
that.
normal. And so it's a situation where, so I'm thinking of that and thinking in terms of populations. And if you're a Palestinian, who do you remember? I mean, when you think of an Israeli, do you think of a nice Israeli who wishes you no ill will
No,
and just
no.
wants peace? No, you think of the guy who did something messed up. And
I
it's the
totally get that.
yeah, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing in reverse, that
Yeah.
you're going to think of the guys who are launching rockets at you. Now it is a problem, and I think this is what Chloe and some of the others are getting at, that you do have large percentages of the population of Gaza that supports Hamas, and of the West Bank that supports Hamas, and so on. So it's not like you've got a few problematic individuals and then a bunch of just perfectly nice
So,
guy. You've got a lot
wh-
of, so it is an issue. But yeah, go ahead.
so to engage this, I think you beautifully laid out the tapestry, and I think we need to try to be fair and look at both sides here. And I think the Palestinian, because I have a lot of close companions who are Palestinian, and I've talked to some, and they're like, "Hey, I want a unified state. I want a one-state solution." Probably they would want it called Palestine, but they said a secular Palestinian state with Jews and Arabs being a part of it, but Jews and Arabs are equal. I was in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv. Funny, I actually went on a Jewish trip, but I went to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and I was in Jerusalem, and I spent a lot of time with Arabs there. And the Arabs of Jerusalem are very different than the Arabs of Gaza and West Bank, I feel, at least the ones that I've met in America. They said, yes, we have difficulty with Israelis, but we're happy with the leadership. We're not against it. I don't necessarily, like, I was talking to a Muslim, and the Muslim was like, I don't really understand Judaism. I don't understand why they talk about prophets this way. But I don't think Jewish people are bad. I do think some of them are snooty. And I'm like, I hear that. I understand. But I mean, we have to understand that Jewish people have different perspectives. I was wearing a kippah there too, so it's pretty funny. But so we were having a conversation about that, and I think what's going on is Hamas, in a sense, is actually kind of brilliant. And same as Taliban. These people do a kind of a brilliant strategy where they basically hurt the people greatly. They steal the resources from the people, and it's hard because when people say that, they're like, "What do you mean steal the resource?" There's caches of resources that have been stolen. Um, but like the PLO, people are like, "Oh, the PLO is horrible and terrible." I'm like, dude, the PLO looks like paradise compared to what we have now. You know what I mean? Like Yasser Arafat came to the table. I'm not saying it was perfect, but there was like accords, like the Camp David Accords, like something was going on. You know what I mean? I miss Yitzhak Rabin too. I wish we had a Yitzhak Rabin too. Like I'm not saying it's perfect, but I wish we had more something like that. But the situation now is, I think there's been a lot of recent trauma, and I think what's happened is, and they do, like, Gil Schuster does a lot of like interviews with like Palestinians and with Arabs and with Jews, and he's like Palestinian citizens of Israel and Jewish citizens of Israel, and he does interviews with people in Gaza and West Bank, and I think primarily, I think it's like maybe West Bank, but he does interviews in all these different places. But I think the issue is we have people, like, just like you mentioned. I think you made a beautiful portrait. People are feeling like they're in a prison, so they get into this complex where they're like, even though we might be battling with each other, these people are the boogeyman. And I think we need to talk about anti-Semitism. That's actually part of the work that I do because I want to make peace relations with Muslims and Jews. I think it's necessary to do that, and it's very hard because there are a lot of anti-Semitic thoughts that are existing, or anti-Jewish thoughts that are existing, because Muslims don't know Jews and they don't understand Jews. I saw a debate, I don't know if it was with you, with Daniel Hakakichu. He didn't even know who Rambam was. It looked like he Googled up the Rambam, or Rabbi Moses Maimonides, like one of the most prolific, most powerful theologians within Judaism. And he didn't know how to say his name. I'm like,
Yeah, I
dude,
remember that. He goes, my money. Yeah.
yeah, he didn't know how
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
it. I'm like, if you don't know how to say this man's name, you don't know anything about this guy's theology. You probably Google Wikipedia him, and you're a good rhetorician, so you knew how to like pick up some points. You did like a Spark Notes reading, and then you're trying to present this very powerful rabbi, and you're limiting him completely, and it's kind of grotesque, honestly speaking. This guy was the physician of the Caliph, of the Sultan. I'm like, this dude is deep level. He's like one of the most highest scholars of Judaism, and I'm like, what are you doing? You know, like, how would you feel if your Ibn Taymiyyah was taken and he was just, oh yeah, I don't know how to say, I'm gonna say Tamuma. It's Tamuma. I don't know how to, I don't really know what this guy is saying. I'm gonna take one thing and then just mischaracterize him and throw him. I'm like, it's terrible, you know. But to answer the question, I think you answered it very well. I think you're dealing with people who have extreme trauma. There's a lot of complexity in the area. You know, there's like the Intifadas, you have the Nakbas, you have the 6 Arab nations that invaded um, Israel. You have all of these complexities of the story, but people want to take a certain story and just run with that story. And I think we have to be nuanced. We have to be fair in this space. Has the Israel government been perfect? No. Have the Palestinian situation been completely fair? No. The idea of saying, well, the Palestinians are indigenous to the land, I don't know how you. I would say Palestinians are probably related to the Israelis a lot, like DNA wise. There's probably a lot in common. I heard that story. I think it was on your channel where you had the imam who was saying, or the imam who was saying, you know, look at these Jews. They're not really Jews. They're white people. And I said, I can show you Palestinians that are white people too. What's your point? Like, this is a stupid argument that you're making. I'm like, I could show you a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Palestinian. So if you want to say the Ashkenazim are not real Jews, are you not a real Palestinian? Are you really not indigenous? This phenotype, it's a racism. It's a phenotypical racism. So like, um, I think it's really disgusting and it's really gross. And I guess my answer is these people are really, it's a really complex situation, and I want peace in the Middle East. So that's kind of where I stand.
Yeah, and I would just add, because you're talking about Hamas, you know, stealing the resources and so on. Something that Jordan Peterson has talked about is that individuals with what are called the dark tetrad. Sometimes it's called a dark triad, some a dark tetrad more recently, but people with the dark tetrad characteristics, personality traits. So narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and sadism. These people with these personality types will inject themselves into situations and disputes that they then use to their own advantage to favor themselves. So they see other people in bad situations and they show up and, hey, I'll help you guys out, when really it's to. So in the case of like Hamas, it's, hey, we can go in there and, hey, the longer we keep this going, the better, because, you know, we funnel the aid money to ourselves and we become literal billionaires off of this stuff. But even like the Dawa guys, right? I mean, the Dawa guys will explode in popularity over this stuff because, hey, guys, I'm the one who's going to lead the cavalry on social media, defending the Palestinians and so on. And the result is that you have people who. So notice, if you think like your average Palestinian, the message that would be most helpful to your average Palestinian would be, guys, whatever you think about the past, this is the situation that we're in.
Yes.
What's the path
Amen.
forward? Yes. Be realistic. What's the path forward? You are not more powerful than these guys. You're not going to wipe them off the map. It's not going to happen. That's stupid. You're not going to do that. So what is best for you? It would seem like building up your own area and eventually having your own state, something along those lines. You don't get that with Hamas. So that's the message that would be most helpful.
I agree.
If you can keep milking the situation, is that what you want people to do? No, of course not. So the people with the dark tetrad are going to go in there and they're going to make sure nothing like that ever happens. They're never. You want to make sure there's never peace, because that ends. And keep in mind, I'm not saying this is not this is not unique to that situation. There are all sorts of issues where one politician's saying this and one politician's
Yes.
saying that, and the politician says, I'll fix this. And it's like, is it really in that politician's interest to fix that when
Yeah.
he's only popular because he's the solution to the problem? What happens if he actually solved the problem? Well, he's irrelevant now because that was why. And so it's a situation, and it's guys, people
I
need to
wanted to add one thing
be
to that
aware
too.
that there are people all over this world who have some really messed up personalities who see opportunities to manipulate others, and they jump and they inject themselves into that situation. And that's what you got here. And until people can actually see through it, rough situations ahead.
And I want to add something to this too that I think is really important. Like on my Instagram, I have half of my friends are like pro-Israel, half of them are pro-Palestinian. So every time I see the chat, I see, hey, this pro-Israeli thing, then I see a pro-Palestinian thing. It really, you get kind of real shell shock. Like it's like bam, 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 bam. But the thing that I saw on the pro-Palestine situation, which was really kind of horrific for me, is I keep seeing these videos of Palestinian children, uh, people who are all bloodied, missing limbs. I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. If I was a Palestinian, I have some Arab ancestry. I'm partially Egyptian and Iraqi, but I'm not Palestinian, I guess. But if I was a Palestinian, I would never show any of those videos ever. I'm like, my family, it would be a dishonor to my family to show my family in such a horrible state. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm wondering who is filming these videos and posting them. Like, there's something about that that's like, it's like a torture pornography. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something sickening about that. I'm like, can't these people's lives have dignity? Why would you want? I don't want to post any horrific thing. And you know, like those videos of the Hamas folks. I think Hamas revealed those, released those videos of the women being. I'm like, who wants to show this stuff? This is disgusting and gross. Human beings shouldn't see these things. It hurts us. Like it psychologically mars us, you know. And I'm like, I don't know. Like when I saw those videos, I'm like, why would you share these videos? Why would you post them on social media? Like, what is your point? These innocent people are suffering. It's like, I don't know. It's like, it's a horror for me. I'm like, I would never do this to my own family. Would you do that to your family? Would you, like, if your family was going through a struggle and some horrific thing happened, like, I don't know, like a bomb hit, would you want to show this video of your family going through the struggle? I don't know. Maybe that's just my view. I don't know what you would think about that, but
yeah, pretty wild stuff. All right, we want to wrap up here in about the
sure.
next
Sorry.
15 minutes. No, not you. I'm just telling everyone.
Yeah.
Want to wrap up in about the next 15 minutes, so this doesn't become too long. Issa's always welcome to join us in the future to
Thank
talk
you.
about specific things. So we'll go through a few more. Guys, there's still a bunch more super chats. We're not going to get to them unless we stay here for another 2.5 hours, because Issa likes to speak for 10 minutes on every.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Just joking. So love thy neighborhood. So I'll just go through a few more, and then we'll cut it off right around about 13, 14 more minutes. So love thy neighbor. Hey, D Wood, thank you for having him on your channel. This man has a good head on his shoulder, different from the other guys you and AP usually debate. That's pretty true. Francis here says, Issa, you're a positive shock to ex-Muslims like me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so Francis, Muslim background. Love thy neighbor. Last year, churches and houses of Christians were burnt for false accusations of blasphemy against Islam in Pakistan. I guess this was from earlier when we were talking about some of that.
It's unfortunate. I wish it didn't happen. It's horrible. I think of Asia Bibi, and it's just a terrible case of human rights, but, you know.
Yeah. Let's see. Thank you for coming and talking to us, sir. Thanks, D Wood, for hosting this. That's what I do, ladies and gentlemen. I bring everyone together. I'm skipping over a bunch of super chats. I'm trying to get to some either nice ones, because it's good to close on some nice things, or any. There's still a bunch on the eyes of the leather strap of the anus. Let's see. Oh, here you go. As a Scythi, I don't know if that person is, if that's if that was a typo, or if the person is going with the Star Wars here.
I think it's yeah, that might be that.
Star Wars,
I think it's
yes.
Star Wars, yeah.
So, so giving the Sithy interpretation of Sufi. Is it true that you have access to powers that some would consider unnatural?
I think I'm just I'm a simple normal person, you know. I'm just trying to be the best person I can be, you know.
Oh, here's a question that was actually tied into something earlier, but yeah, this is I've seen the responses to this. So, but why would so this is from earlier? But why would Muhammad's ancient followers decide to make up a story about him marrying slash sleeping with a young girl? So the question is if this is based on the principle of embarrassment, and this is an important principle for historical examination. If you're looking at a story and you're wondering if it's true or not, you have to think, why would someone make this up?
I've got an argument for why. Well,
Oh,
first
so
and
do yeah,
foremost,
so do I, because the people who doubt the story actually have reasons for it.
so like one thing that people could say, hey, I can tell you why this story happened. Well, the Prophet of Islam only had wives who weren't quote unquote virgins. So he has a virgin wife. So he's made it with that. You know, like some people might make that argument. And also they may have just not been embarrassed. That may have not been an embarrassing thing for those people, you know? So I think there's a lot of explanations. I don't think we should just, you know, limit it out. But you
Yeah, and I'm not entirely I'm not convinced at all by the explanation, but I do recognize that there are problems with the Muslim sources. But yeah, so the claim is, and generally the hadiths about Aisha can be traced back to one or two people who were part of her family. So her nephew and her
that's actually a
grandnephew.
great argument.
Yeah.
That's a great argument that shows that she has legitimacy. That she's been with him so long. She's been with him forever. That's actually a great argument. Yeah.
So the claim, so the idea, again, I'm not really convinced by it, but it is a possible explanation for why it would have been invented at some point. It's if the Abu Bakr line is trying to rally support around themselves and consolidate their own authority in the Muslim community. There are
It's
different
perfect.
ways. There are different ways they're going about this, but one way is Aisha was his favorite wife. Okay, well, and Aisha was a
Forever,
virgin, and
forever.
Aisha was a
A
virgin, and
virgin
so
forever.
yeah,
Exactly. It's a
yes.
complete position for showing the house of Abu Bakr. You're totally right. That is an argument one could make. It's a really good one. Yeah.
Do Sufis not believe in self-defense at all? So are you? And I guess we're not talking about you specifically, but would Sufis be pacifist? I don't think so. I think
It
you would
depends
have
on the
some.
Sufi.
Yeah.
Some were on the battlefield, some were not. Like actually, and I think AP knows this, but Turkey is a Sufi country, so the Naqshbandi definitely were connected with. That's a Sufi order that were definitely connected with the ruling class of the Ottomans. So definitely there was. It depends on which Sufi you're asking and how they're influenced and where they stand, but some had self-defense, military stuff, and some didn't. So it just depends on who.
Sufism really reminds me of Baha'ism, which is my previous religion before I came to Christ. Any thoughts on that?
I actually know a lot about Baha'i. I wanted to make a Baha'i movie. It's funny the Bab. It's probably might be related. Say he's a Sayyid. So the story of Baha'ism is it happened in Iran. It's actually it's a manifestation of Shia Islam. So it is of Sufi origin. I would argue Baha'i is, I would say, in a sense, a Sufi tradition. Baha'i is very equitable. It's very much into equity and equality and between men and women. So yeah, I would say Sufis and Baha'is are deeply interconnected. Sure.
Um, Thanks for coming on, Issa. You seem like a pretty based guy. God bless you, and may you come to know Him in spirit and truth. Sorry,
Thank you.
I was looking at the next one. The Jew in Hakika Jew gives the response from Daniel. I guess this is earlier when I said he should he should have played the guy in in the Palestinian children's videos, and we got the response, "No, I will never play the Jahud occupant in Farfor." Oh, okay. This is you don't have to respond to this if you don't, but this is along the so Surah 65, verse 4 of the Quran. Not sure you are familiar with the reference. That is so you had earlier in the Quran, this is tied into the issue of Muhammad and Aisha.
Sure.
But earlier in the Quran, Allah had laid down rules about divorcing women, and the ruling was after you divorce a woman, wait 3 monthly menstrual cycles so that so that there won't be any dispute about whose kid. If a child
Yeah.
is born, there won't be any dispute. Yeah, there's a big enough gap in there that there won't be any disputes about whose kid is whose. And then, according to the Asbab al-Nuzul, so the historical background, Surah 65, verse 4 is revealed in response to some questions about what about wives that we divorce who don't have a monthly menstrual cycle. And so there were 3 categories. One was, okay, women who are too old, so they've gone through menopause, girls who are too young, and then pregnant women. What are the rules because they don't have a monthly menstrual cycle? What do we do if we divorce them? And the Quran gives rules. So anyway, as far as why this was asked, it's because you're pointing out that that you think it would be wrong to have sex with a little girl, and you don't believe that it's something that actually happened. And so this person is clearly saying, but it's not just in the later sources. Notice this doesn't say anything about Muhammad and Aisha. But if you have a problem with sex with a minor, how would you interpret that, I guess, is the question.
So I think I've taken this position before. I'm not a literalist. And we've had our conversation before. I don't think literalism is helpful. I don't think it's useful to the text. Sure, the text may have some historical grounding in some place, but I think this comes from a hyper-literalistic reading of texts, and I don't read it that way, so I don't think that would be an issue for me.
All right, and let's see. Issa's version of Islam is like a totally different religion you and AP normally tackle. Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Well, and the funny thing is people say, well, your thing is just some made-up thing, and I'm like, actually, you can find the stuff in the classical sources. Maybe I'm probably more progressive than the ancestors, so I'm not going to lie, or more leftist or liberal, whatever term you want to use. I'm not against someone saying that, but I actually can ground my stuff in classical sources. These folks just claim that they claim they're from the Sahaba. They claim that they're from the earliest rank, the Salafis, but then they quote scholars. They just quote the scholars they like. They say, oh, we don't believe in Sunniism, because the Salafis try to claim they're Sunni, but they're not Sunni. It's a really weird kind of trick that they do. They say, well, we're actually to the first rank. And I'm like, how do you do that? How do you go back 1,400 years? You know what I mean? It doesn't work that way. You have to have a chain of teachers. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to just automatically go back to Christ. I have other teachers that you understand. You have early church fathers. You have all this stuff. I think it's just really weird where people are like, well, I can just go back to the source. And I'm like, well, how do you do that? Oh, you basically are just a Sunni. I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah, so this is going to be an issue that keeps coming up whenever we have a Muslim who isn't like the Muslims that we're normally interacting with, which as I've mentioned, the Muslims that we would normally be interacting with are the more aggressive Muslims that come at us, right? And so you have a couple of issues. One, that the most Muslims in the world would identify as Sunni Muslims, but the ones that most people would be familiar with. It's different if you go to school and you have a friend who's a Muslim, then you know a Muslim like that. If you're just online, what Muslims are you going to be familiar with? A lot of them are going to be guys who are coming at you. And so
I saw them.
Yeah.
I saw them talking, and it's horrific. Like, I was just shocked by how some of these people are talking, where they're like, yeah, if my woman doesn't cook for me, bye-bye. I'm like, aren't you in a relationship? Like, that should not be the big thing. You could take takeout too. You know what I'm saying? If neither of you know how to cook, like, you're in a relationship, make it work. But it was super weird. Like, some of the things that I heard, I was like, they're like, well, this is this is what we agreed upon when we got married. I'm like, but things change when you get married. That's a part of marriage. Is that things will change. You will have to navigate through things that are difficult. You're gonna have problems. You're gonna change as people, and that's okay. But it's so weird.
Hmm.
It's a bizarre place.
Couple more, do rapid fire.
Please.
Timothy here says, David Wood, Christian, computer fine. Issa Kabeer, Sufi, computer fine. Apostate Prophet, atheist, computer broken. Draw your own conclusions. Not familiar. Not sure you're familiar with this ongoing joke, but
No, tell me.
well, yeah, people normally draw. I mean, it can go in either direction. It normally goes in my favor. They normally say David Wood, Christian, and then some good thing that happened. Apostate Prophet, atheist, and then some bad thing that happened, and then draw your own conclusions. And so the joke here is, I'm a Christian, my computer works. You're a Sufi, your computer works. AP is an atheist, his computer doesn't work. So draw your own
Got
conclusions.
it. Got it. Makes sense. That's cute.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving me the lore. That's helpful.
Yeah, we've talked about, because there are so many things now. I mean, it kind of started with the leather straps, where everyone started using that as kind of a joke, but it became a thing where there are like all these inside jokes now from the people here, because you have a lot of the same people who are interacting with us every live stream and so on. And so there's all these inside jokes, and when someone new comes along, they don't understand what anyone's talking about. So we're thinking about actually making like a glossary for anyone who's new, and just say, hey, here's the glossary. Heavy Heart Show says, I used to be mystic, but Jesus of Nazareth was and is a real historical person who calls us out of uncertainty. Acts 17:30. And so, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? So you believe that Jesus and Muhammad were real historical persons and so on. So what do you think about that as far as a response to mysticism?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, how do we define mysticism? Um, to me personally, I'm not so concerned about historicity. I'm more interested in the teaching. What is the teaching us? So, like, if people said, well, if Jesus existed or didn't exist, I care about what Jesus represents. I care about what Jesus is teaching. And I think people get so it's like we get wrapped up in, like, is this thing real? Like, did the Iliad happen? You know what I mean? Did the Odyssey happen? You know, was Agamemnon, Paris, all these people, did they actually exist? I don't care. That to me is not the importance. I think this fixation on whether the person is literally real or not is an important. I'm interested in the teaching. So the teachings are interesting because we have a whole variety of teachings. And I'll be honest, the Jesus teachings are very digestible, I think, for a modern audience in a lot of ways. Unless people, want to like nitpick, like there was a Pastor Robertson who's interesting, where he argues, he's an LGBTQ pastor, and he argues that Jesus that Jesus had a battle with, he saw the Samaritan as a lesser person than himself, as opposed to it being like a wisdom teaching to like teach a higher understanding. So I try to lean to the space of higher teachings. And I definitely think if we look at the mystical teachings of the Prophet of Islam, it's very different than your traditional hadith. But these are narrated through Sufi sheikhs, so that's it's a different thing. It's a very different kind of source material. You have to read the Sufi sheikhs to get this material of what they think of him. But yeah, the hadith are complex. So, but to me, I think that the teachings of Christ are esoteric and mystically based, but that's how I view it from where I'm coming from. This person may view it in a different way, and that's okay.
Issa, please help every Muslim be like you.
Well, thank you.
You kind of mentioned this. You kind of addressed this earlier, but are Sufis similar to Ahmadis? You actually you classify you said that using your breakdown that they would be Sufis.
I would say Ahmadis are Sufi, and definitely the Lahori Sufis are the Lahori Ahmadiyya, who don't think Mirza. There's a split in the Ahmadiyya. You have the Lahori Ahmadiyya, and you have the your traditional Ahmadiyya. The Lahori Ahmadiyya see Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as a Sufi sheikh, right? The other Lahore is a city in Pakistan. The other Ahmadiyya see Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as like a prophet, which they actually have an interesting argumentation for. They said, well, what is it called? Khatamun Nabiyyin. Khatamun Nabiyyin means the seal of the prophets. You can interpret seal of the prophets to mean that the prophet of Islam is a seal, not that he's Nabil Khalisin, or the final prophet. So I don't have an issue. I think that's an interesting methodology, but I would say that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad functions as a Sufi sheikh. So yeah, I would take that position.
Prince Christian here says, Issa, that's you, is a proper personification of taqiyya. He is sounding like a poison and favorite drink than the actual sharpened, bloodthirsty sword and a serpent. I'll just speak on Issa's behalf here. I am well aware of Muslims, especially the Dawah guys, lying for their religion, trying to cover it up, trying to whitewash it for their purposes. Issa, you definitely don't come across that way to me.
I think I've been very accountable, and I think one thing, like, I will never say that the Islamic tradition is this perfect tradition. I'd say there's a lot of problems. Like, when people, and I think I've been pretty fair and accountable. The thing is, this person, I think, has a lot of pain in what they feel. They probably had very bad interactions with a lot of Muslims, and I understand this kind of point of view, because I'm trying to show that there's maybe something positive here, that I must be wrong, because Islam has to be evil, it has to be bad, it has to be gross, because this person's worldview sees Islam that way. I would ask this person, Prince Christian, to like steelman what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Instead of strawmanning me, steelman me. Try to see it from my point of view. Be in my shoes. I'm not telling you to believe anything. I'm a pluralist. I'm fine with your faith. I'm not telling you to think like me. But if I also, this is an important point. You brought this up in our last conversation. These people who are, have the sharpened sword, they want to kill me too. I'm on their chopping block. They don't want me around because I destabilize their power. And it's the same thing. Why, like I hear in the anti-Semitic rings, they say, well, the prophets were killed by the Jews. I said, that's not true. What happened was people in the community who wanted power were afraid of the prophets. So they killed the prophets because their power was destabilized. So someone like me destabilizes the Salafis' power. They don't want me around. They don't want to hear what I have to say because I'm scary to them. They want a monolithic thing. They want their caliphate. They want their thing to exist. So if they were to succeed, they would want to knock me off because I'm challenging them. I'm saying, hey, your anti-Semitism, your you people of European ancestry, your hate of all these people is wrong. They don't want me around. I'm the first to go on the chopping block. So,
yeah, and it's kind of an issue. I think I just mentioned when the last time me and AP were live, but I've mentioned it multiple times. I've never seen anyone who lies as freely and with as little concern as some of the Dawa guys. Like anytime they need to make any point, any criticism of another position, there's like no concern.
You're right.
At all for being honest, and they know, and it seems to be absorbed by their fans as well, that you could say, hey, he just said this, and look at what the source actually says. That was a lie, and they don't seem to care. The fans don't seem to care. And so you have people who sort of witness this over time, and they think, this is just all Muslims. All Muslims are like this. They just lie. And so when you come along and say, no, here's what I believe, there's a tendency to say, aha, he's trying to trick us. But that's the problem once
I'm trying to deceive you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a problem once you spot a bunch of people lying, then when those people who are lying tell you, no,
Right.
actually Islam is peaceful or something like this, then you think, oh, okay, they're lying. And you can actually there were times when you can actually catch people doing this. Like there were people after the 9/11 attacks who are going out and going, oh, this is no part of Islam. And then they find videos of them glorifying it behind the
I
scenes
know.
and laughing about it and
And
celebrating it.
Mossad did it. Mossad did 9/11. Like and we have these lies about it. I'm like, yes, the people who did it happen to identify as being Muslim. They did do this, and you can't say they're not Muslim because it's a no true Scotsman fallacy. If they identify as being Muslim, then they are. Is it a horrible, evil atrocity that happened? Yes. Um, People could try to explain why it happened. For me, I'm peaceful. I don't believe in that. But I understand what you're saying. I get
Yeah.
the point where they're coming from.
Yeah. So the idea is once you have a bunch of people lying, no, here's the issue. And the reason,
Sure.
because I've encountered people who are, no, they're all lying. They're all lying. And so I had a couple responses that's like, well, I've known Muslims. I've known Muslims that I knew really well and I knew for years, and I know they're not lying. But two, I've known Muslims who left Islam and they didn't come to me afterwards. Hey, I was planning on killing you the entire time when I was a Muslim, but I'm not a Muslim anymore. Right. So in other words, if you had been lying and practicing deception when you're a Muslim and then you leave Islam, well, that would be a perfect opportunity to say, oh, actually, I was lying about all that stuff. And no, Nabil was not lying to me when he was telling me that Islam is actually peaceful. Nabil wasn't lying to me. If he was, then once he left Islam and became a Christian, he said, I was just lying about all that stuff. He didn't. He actually believed that stuff. So no, there are Muslims, even if, in other words, even if you think Issa is wrong in his understanding of Islam, that doesn't mean he's lying about it. But that's kind of the problem once you have a liar. Because notice, if you have a Muslim who actually wants to kill you, but he wants to deceive you, then he's going to say, no, Islam is peaceful. But if you have someone who actually believes in a more peaceful version of Islam, he's also going to say the same thing, it's peaceful. And so outwardly, they're saying the exact same thing. And so the problem is you kind of don't know until you actually know someone or you've listened to them enough to understand their position. You don't know if a person's lying to you or telling the truth.
I watched your video about Daniel Hakakichu, and you changed your position on him. You first thought, oh, he's really honest and earnest, and when he was talking about Islamic sources, but then you were like, whoa, wait a second here. The way he views Christianity is such a deceptive way. Do you see? I've tried to hold Christianity in the best way. I've tried to explain it in the best way that I think a Christian would view Christianity. I've tried to view Judaism in the best way a Jew would view Judaism. I tried to look at different views of what a Muslim would view Islam to be. I tried to do this type of thing. So, I mean, like, to say I'm deceiving, I'm like, I get it. Like, it's a nice kind of platitude to say over and over again. But I'm like, maybe, try to remove your bias for a minute and try to hear someone who might think a little different than you.
Yeah, so on the issue of like Hakikachu, I had encountered so many of the Dawa guys who would just lie about everything that we would bring up as a criticism, that the fact that he was acknowledging that Islam teaches these things was, oh, well, he's being honest. So I'm going to assume that this guy is honest until later on. And then you're finding out, he's not honest about he may be honest about what he believes about certain things, but yeah, definitely not honest in general. All right, we will, guys. I understand there are more super chats and so on. We're going to go ahead and close out after one more. So apologize if I didn't get to. I didn't even finish reading all the super chats to see which ones we want to respond to. But I thought this would be a decent one to close out on for Issa here. So, how would you summarize open-mindedness in Sufism?
I think it's the core of it. Being able to be pluralistically thinking. I think that's the most important thing of Sufism. Because if you read, I wish we could get into this at some point, we will. We should read the Sufi literature and look at what Sufis have to say. But a lot of it is about not tribalism. It's about escaping the tribalistic narrative and being able to see humanity. I think that's a really important thing. I'm not saying that all the Sufi literature is perfect. You're going to have some things that might be hostile, antagonistic to things. I try to be accountable. I'm not going to say, oh, Sufism is the most perfect tradition. I'm like, there are problems here. You can have some cultishness that can come in. There's lots of issues that can occur. But I think the major point that you would see in a Sufi is that they're willing to grow. They're willing to, it's a lot of moral self-cultivation, being a better human, and being open to other people and learning wisdom from other people. I'm going to give you several sheikhs that that you can look into. There's Bawa Muhyiddin, there's Shirdi Sai Baba. These sheikhs, particularly in South Asia, South Asia is a very pluralistic space, but a lot of these sheikhs, they taught Muslims, Hindus, Christians, all in their spaces, in their ashrams, in their dargahs. They did this, and the people did not have to become Muslim or whatever. Shirdi Sai Baba is venerated as a deity for Hindus, and he prayed 5 times a day. And people don't even know about him. A lot of Muslims don't even know about who this guy is. But he had Muslim students, he had Hindu students, and he was a teacher of wisdom. So I'll leave it with that.
All right, everyone, thanks for joining us. Thanks to Issa for coming in and giving us a breakdown of Sufism. And I'm sure we'll have Issa on again in the future, especially if we have any topics coming up. And hey, maybe we should get together and do a skit one day.
Sure, I'd love to.
We should do a funny skit. Hey, we should do a skit making fun of the Dawa guys. That would be fun. That'd be classic. All right, everyone. Thanks, and see you all. Catch you all next time. And yeah, I was gonna say check out my video tomorrow. Every time I say I will post the video tomorrow, something happens and I don't post it tomorrow. But all right. So check out a video that will be coming soon, ladies and gentlemen. Catch y'all later.